Commander Jace Ryland smoothed his hands over the formal dress uniform he hadn't worn in years. The synthetic material felt foreign against his skin, much like everything else about this assignment. The Astrakel diplomatic station loomed ahead through the view screen, a gleaming crystalline structure orbiting the neutral zone between Human Alliance space and the Virilan Empire. Commander, our docking sequence will complete in approximately 7 minutes. Saria's voice, the ship's AI, filled his quarters with a tone that somehow managed to sound both mechanical and concerned. Your vital signs indicate elevated stress levels. Would you like me to recommend breathing exercises? Jace smiled despite himself. No, Saria, I'm fine. Your current heart rate suggests otherwise. This is your 14th uniform adjustment in the past 10 minutes. He sighed. Just doing my part to ensure humanity doesn't start an interstellar war because I looked sloppy. Historical data suggests wars typically begin due to resource disputes, ideological differences, or territorial expansion, not wrinkled uniforms. Saria replied. It was a joke, Saria. A brief pause. Ah, human humor. I'll add it to my learning algorithms. Jace turned away from the mirror. The truth was, his nervousness went far beyond appearance. After decades of hostility, this would be the first official diplomatic contact between humans and the Virilan in nearly a century. And somehow, Fleet Command had decided that he, a pilot with a specialization in tactical operations, should be the one to escort the Virilan envoy aboard. Commander, Saria's voice interrupted his thoughts. Admiral Kincaid is requesting your presence on the command deck. Jace nodded, straightening his shoulders. Tell him I'm on my way. The corridors of the Mercy Star hummed with activity as he made his way to the bridge. The ship had been specifically designed for this mission, a mix of military precision and diplomatic luxury. As a gesture of peace, the Alliance had deliberately chosen a vessel with minimal weapons capabilities, though Jace knew that several battlecruisers were positioned just beyond sensor range. Trust, but verify. When the doors to the command deck slid open, Admiral Kincaid stood with his back to the entrance, hands clasped behind him as he studied the approaching station. Commander Ryland reporting as ordered, Sir, Jace announced. The Admiral turned, his weathered face creased with what might have been either concern or indigestion. Ryland. Good. Our guest arrives in 20 minutes. Are you prepared for the protocol? Yes, sir. I've studied the briefing materials extensively. Then you understand the gravity of this mission. The Virilan have agreed to send their representative, Envoy Talari-san, to discuss potential peace terms. This is the first time in history one of their high-ranking officials has agreed to board a human vessel. Jace nodded. I understand, sir. Do you? Kincaid's eyes narrowed. Because I'm not sure anyone truly does. The Virilan are not like us. Ryland. They evolved from reptilian stock, cold-blooded in more ways than one. Their society operates on principles we barely comprehend. A matriarchal structure so rigid, it makes our most regressive historical societies seem progressive by comparison. The cultural briefings were thorough, Admiral. Briefings are theory. You'll be dealing with reality. Kincaid turned back to the view screen. I selected you for this mission for a specific reason, Commander. Sir? Your service record at the Battle of Nexus Prime. You showed remarkable restraint and cultural sensitivity under extreme pressure. Jace felt his jaw tighten. Nexus Prime wasn't something he liked to remember. The Alliance had declared it a victory, but he knew better. Thousands of colonists, human and Virilan alike, had died because of miscommunication and pride. That wasn't in my official record, sir. No, it wasn't, Kincaid agreed. But I have sources beyond official records. Your actions saved lives that day, even if Command never acknowledged it. Before Jace could respond, Saria's voice filled the bridge. Admiral, the Virilan diplomatic vessel is approaching our docking bay. Very well, Kincaid nodded. Ryland, proceed to docking bay 3. Remember, this encounter must succeed. The Council believes war is inevitable. But I disagree. Peace is possible, but it depends on understanding. Yes, sir. Jace turned to leave. And, Commander, Kincaid called after him. Remember that to the Virilan, every gesture has meaning. Be mindful of yours. Jace made his way to the docking bay, mentally reviewing the protocols. The Virilan Empire spanned 12 star systems, governed by a complex hierarchy of female leaders. Males existed in their society, but held subordinate positions, mainly as workers, soldiers, or caregivers. The envoy he was meeting, Talari San, was apparently of high rank within their diplomatic corps. As he reached the docking bay, he noticed the temperature had been adjusted. Warmer, much warmer than the rest of the ship. Of course, the Virilan were reptilian in origin. They preferred environments that humans found uncomfortably hot. The docking mechanism engaged with a mechanical hiss, followed by the sound of pressurization. Jace stood at attention, focusing on keeping his breathing steady despite the heat. The inner airlock door slid open, revealing a figure that made him momentarily forget protocol. Envoy Talari Cyan was tall, at least 7 feet, with iridescent scales that shifted from deep emerald to sapphire blue as she moved. Her features were surprisingly elegant, with high cheekbones and almond-shaped eyes of burnished gold. Instead of hair, a crest of delicate, feather-like structures rose from her skull, currently lying flat against her head in what Jace hoped was a neutral position. She wore a form-fitting garment that seemed to be made of some metallic, flowing material, adorned with symbols that presumably denoted her rank. Most striking, however, was the small, crystalline object suspended from a chain around her neck. It pulsed with a soft blue light that seemed to beat in rhythm with her movements. 2 male Virilan guards flanked her, their scales darker and their stances clearly defensive. They carried no visible weapons, a diplomatic concession, but Jace had no doubt they were dangerous nonetheless. Remembering his training, Jace bowed his head precisely 45 degrees, not so deep as to suggest submission, but enough to convey respect. Envoy Talari Cyan, on behalf of the Human Alliance, welcome aboard the Mercy Star. I am Commander Jace Ryland, assigned to escort you during your stay with us. The Virilan's gaze was unnerving, unblinking, and utterly alien. After what felt like an eternity, she inclined her head slightly. Commander! Her voice was melodious, but with an underlying hiss that no translation technology could fully smooth out. The Empire acknowledges your greeting. Formal, cold, exactly as expected. This was going well so far. If you'll follow me, I'll escort you to your quarters where you can refresh yourself before the preliminary discussions begin. She nodded once, and Jace turned to lead the way. They walked in silence through the corridors, crew members stepping aside and lowering their eyes as instructed. The Virilan considered direct eye contact from strangers to be confrontational. As they reached the specially prepared guest quarters, Jace stepped forward to activate the door panel. The doors slid open to reveal a spacious suite, temperature already adjusted to Virilan preferences. He stepped aside and, without thinking, gestured for her to enter first. After you, he said, the polite phrase automatic after years of ingrained habit. Talari froze, completely, utterly still, as if she'd turned to stone. Her crest, previously flat, suddenly flared outward in a dramatic display. Behind her, the guards tensed, hands moving to their sides where weapons would normally be. Jace stood paralyzed, mind racing through the cultural briefings. What had he done wrong? The moment stretched, taut with potential violence. Then, slowly, Talari's golden eyes narrowed. Is this how the Alliance begins negotiations, Commander? With insult? Insult? Jace kept his voice level, though his heart hammered against his ribs. I assure you, no insult was intended. You invite me to walk ahead of you, into an unknown space. Her voice was ice. In my culture, this is equivalent to offering prey the first step into a predator's den. Understanding dawned, bringing with it a cold flood of realization. Something as simple as ladies first, a gesture considered polite in human culture, was interpreted as a deadly insult in hers. Envoy Saiyan, he said carefully, in human culture, allowing someone to enter a room first is a sign of respect, not threat. It seems we've encountered our first cultural misunderstanding. Her crest remained extended, but after a moment, she tilted her head slightly. Explain. In human traditions, particularly older ones, allowing a guest or a female to enter a space first is considered courteous. It implies trust and honor. He kept his tone even, educational rather than defensive. Talari was silent for a long moment, her unblinking gaze fixed on him. Then, to his surprise, she made a sound, a soft clicking that the translator didn't process. The briefings mentioned your species has strange customs regarding gender roles. Is this one of them? Jace chose his next words carefully. It's an older tradition, yes. One that has evolved over time but remains in many of our social interactions. Interesting. Her crest slowly began to flatten. In Virilan society, to allow another to enter unknown territory first is to suggest they are expendable. The tension in the corridor gradually subsided as her guards relaxed their stances. Jace felt a bead of sweat roll down his back, partly from the heat, partly from the near-diplomatic incident. Then I should enter first? He asked. That would be appropriate, she confirmed. Jace nodded and stepped through the doorway, conscious of her gaze on his back. Every instinct screamed against turning his back on a potential threat, but he forced himself to move naturally. Once inside, he turned to face her. The quarters have been prepared according to the specifications provided by your advanced team. Temperature, lighting, and gravity have all been adjusted to Virelan standards. The console by the sleeping platform will allow you to make any additional adjustments you require. Talari entered, her movements fluid and precise. The guards remained in the corridor, taking positions on either side of the door. They will remain outside, she stated, rather than asked. Of course, Jace nodded. Security protocols were agreed upon in advance. She moved to the center of the room, her gaze sweeping over the accommodations. The crystal at her neck pulsed more rapidly now, though her expression remained unreadable. Commander, she said finally, it seems our species have much to learn about each other's customs. Perhaps more than your diplomats anticipated. Perhaps that's why this meeting is so important, Jace replied. Understanding begins with recognizing what we don't know. Her eyes locked with his, and for the first time, he saw something besides cold formality in them, a flicker of what might have been curiosity. The preliminary discussions will begin in 3 hours. Will you be escorting me there as well? Yes, I'll return for you then. She nodded once. Before you leave, Commander Ryland, I should warn you, if these cultural provocations continue, I am authorized to terminate this mission immediately. The Empire is not convinced that humans are ready for meaningful dialogue. Some believe your kind too impulsive, too governed by emotion to be trustworthy allies. Jace felt a flash of indignation, but kept his expression neutral. I understand. I'll do everything possible to prevent further misunderstandings. See that you do. She turned away, a clear dismissal. As Jace left the quarters, the guards watching his every move, he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just navigated the first step in a very dangerous dance, one whose steps he didn't fully know. What he didn't know, as the doors closed behind him, was that Admiral Kincaid was already receiving an encrypted transmission from the Human Alliance Council, a transmission containing information about a planned assassination, with Talari Sane as the target, and Jace's new orders: protect her at all costs, without revealing the threat. The mission had just become infinitely more complicated. In his quarters, Jace found a message waiting on his secure terminal. His hand hovered over the interface for a moment before activating it. Admiral Kincaid's face appeared, his expression grave. "Commander, this message is encrypted at the highest level. What I'm about to tell you does not leave this room." The Admiral's voice was tight. "Intelligence has uncovered a plot to assassinate Envoy Saiyan during her stay aboard the Mercy Star. We believe the attack will occur at or before the main conference." Jace felt his blood run cold. "Your mission parameters have changed. You are to protect the envoy at all costs. But, and this is crucial, you cannot inform her of the threat. The Virilan would immediately withdraw and likely interpret the assassination attempt as sanctioned by the Alliance, regardless of our denials. Sir, with respect, keeping her in the dark puts her at risk. And telling her guarantees war." Kincaid's expression hardened. "These are your orders, Commander. Keep her safe. Maintain the appearance of normal diplomatic relations. And find the assassin before they strike." Kincaid out. The screen went dark, leaving Jace staring at his own reflection. He had just 3 hours to figure out how to protect someone who viewed his every gesture with suspicion, without telling her why. "Saria," he called to the ship's AI. "Yes, Commander. I need everything we have on Virilan protective protocols and physical vulnerabilities. Priority level Alpha. Accessing restricted databases. This will require command authorization. Override Rylan Theta 9. Security exception. Processing." A pause. "Data available. Shall I display it now?" Jace took a deep breath. "Yes. And Saria, this stays between us." "Of course, Commander. Human concept of confidentiality. Filed and understood." As information began scrolling across his screen, Jace realized just how little they actually knew about the Virilan. One thing was clear, though: the crystal pendant Talari wore was more than decoration. According to the sparse notes, it was called a thermal essence, a cultural and possibly biological necessity for high-ranking Virilan when traveling off-world. Interesting. Perhaps it was related to their reptilian nature, a way to regulate body temperature in environments not suited to their physiology. It could be a vulnerability, or a key to keeping her alive. The pieces of a plan began to form in his mind. He would need to stay close to Talari without arousing her suspicion, learn to navigate the minefield of Virilan cultural taboos, and somehow identify an assassin among a ship of hundreds, all while making it look like routine diplomatic escort duty. Jace checked the time. 2 hours until he had to collect the envoy for the preliminary discussions. Not much time to prepare for a mission with interstellar peace hanging in the balance. "Saria," he said. "I think I'm going to need those breathing exercises after all." 2 hours and 45 minutes later, Jace stood outside Talari's quarters, mentally rehearsing his approach. His uniform felt uncomfortably tight across his shoulders, likely a combination of the elevated temperature in this section of the ship and the weight of his new assignment. The guards watched him with unwavering attention, their scaled faces impossible to read. Jace inclined his head in what he hoped was a respectful greeting. "I'm here to escort Envoy Saiyan to the preliminary discussions." The guard on the left made a clicking sound before responding. "The envoy anticipates your arrival. You may announce yourself." Jace pressed the notification panel beside the door, careful to keep his movements deliberate and non-threatening. The door slid open to reveal Talari, now adorned in what appeared to be ceremonial attire. Additional metallic ornaments had been woven into her crest, catching the light with each subtle movement of her head. The thermal essence at her throat pulsed with a deeper blue, almost violet. "Commander Ryland," she acknowledged. "You are punctual. This is acceptable." "Thank you, Envoy. If you're ready, I'll lead the way to the conference chamber." She nodded once, and Jace turned, remembering to enter the corridor first. As they walked, he became acutely aware of the silent presence behind him, a predator by evolutionary design, now following in his footsteps. Every nerve ending in his body screamed to turn around, to keep her in sight. But he maintained his composure. "Commander," Talari's voice broke the silence. "Your ship's design is unusual. These corridors curve rather than extend in straight lines." Jace glanced back, not enough to make direct eye contact, but enough to acknowledge her observation. "Yes, the Mercy Star was designed specifically for diplomatic missions. The curved corridors are a security feature that prevents long-range weapons from being effective." "Interesting." There was a new note in her voice, something like approval. "You design with defense in mind, even in your peace vessels. Perhaps our species have more similarities than differences." "I'd like to think so," Jace responded carefully. They continued in silence until they reached a junction where the corridor widened into a small atrium. Here, to Jace's surprise, they encountered two Centaurian delegates, another species attending the conference. The Centaurians were vaguely insectoid, with 4 arms and iridescent compound eyes. They bowed deeply upon seeing Talari. "Honored Envoy," the taller one said, their translator rendering the clicks and buzzes into standard speech. "We of the Centaurian Consensus are pleased by your presence." Jace watched carefully as Talari's crest flattened completely against her skull, a gesture he hadn't seen before. She raised her right hand, palm outward, fingers spread. "The Empire acknowledges the consensus," she replied, her voice noticeably cooler than before. The Centaurians seemed unfazed by her frosty reception and continued on their way after another bow. Once they were out of earshot, Jace risked a question. "If I may ask, what is the relationship between the Virilan Empire and the Centaurian Consensus?" Talari's golden eyes fixed on him. "You're not briefed on all diplomatic relationships?" "General outlines only. The nuances are complicated." She made that clicking sound again. Jace was beginning to suspect it might be something like a human snort or scoff. "The Consensus attempted to mediate previous conflicts between our empire and your alliance. Their methods were ineffective. They believed themselves to be neutral, but they often favor technological societies over biological advantage." Biological advantage. An interesting choice of words. "I see. And the gesture you made, is that a standard greeting?" "No." For the first time, Talari seemed slightly uncomfortable. "It is a protective stance. Centaurians emit low-frequency vibrations that can be disruptive to our thermal regulation. The hand position blocks certain receptor points." Jace filed that information away. Another piece of the Virilan puzzle. "Thank you for explaining. We're almost at the conference chamber." They approached a set of large double doors, where 2 Human Alliance security officers stood at attention. They saluted as Jace approached. "Commander Ryland and Envoy Cyan for the preliminary discussions," Jace announced. The officers stepped aside, and the doors slid open. Inside, a large oval table dominated the center of the room. Admiral Kincaid was already present, along with several human diplomats and representatives from 3 other species. The Centaurians they'd just encountered, a pair of Thalassian water breathers in specialized environmental suits, and a single Nexvoid observer, its crystalline body refracting light in hypnotic patterns. All eyes turned to Talari as she entered, and Jace could feel the tension in the room rise palpably. Envoy Cyan, Admiral Kincaid, stepped forward, bowing precisely as protocol dictated. On behalf of the Human Alliance and all delegates present, we welcome you to these historic discussions. Talari inclined her head, her crest remaining neutral. The Empire acknowledges these proceedings and anticipates productive dialogue. As formal introductions continued, Jace took position slightly behind and to the left of Talari, close enough to intervene if necessary, but not so close as to suggest he was attempting to assert dominance or protection. His eyes scanned the room, assessing each delegate, each security officer, even the staff members preparing refreshments at a side table. Any one of them could be the assassin, or none of them. The attack might come later, from an unexpected quarter. Saria, he subvocalized, activating the neural link to the ship's AI. Full security scan of the conference chamber. Identify any anomalies, no matter how small. Scanning, came the AI's voice in his ear. No weapons detected beyond authorized security personnel. No unauthorized technology active. All present match identification profiles. However, what is it? Jace kept his expression neutral as delegates began taking their seats. Unusual temperature fluctuations in the environmental systems, localized to this chamber only. Pattern appears deliberate rather than mechanical failure. Jace felt his muscles tense. Elaborate. Temperature is being cycled down by 2 degrees every 17 minutes, then restored. The pattern began precisely 8 minutes before your arrival. 2 degrees. For humans, barely noticeable. For the Centaurians and Nexvoid, irrelevant. For the Thalassians in their suits, no impact. But for a Virellan. Jace glanced at Talari, who was now seated at the table. Was the crystal at her throat pulsing more rapidly? Her posture remained perfect, her expression unreadable. But there was a new tension in her scaled hands as they rested on the table's surface. Someone was trying to incapacitate her. Gradually lower the temperature until her reptilian metabolism slowed, making her vulnerable, or potentially forcing her to withdraw from the talks in what would appear to be a diplomatic snub. A clever, non-lethal first move by whoever planned to eliminate her. Saria, trace the source of the temperature manipulation and raise the ambient temperature of the room by 3 degrees, citing a calibration issue, if anyone inquires. Command acknowledged. Tracing source now. Jace moved slightly closer to Talari as Admiral Kincaid began his opening remarks. He needed to warn her somehow, without revealing the full threat. Envoy, he whispered. Are you comfortable with the environmental settings? I notice your thermal essence has changed color. Talari's eyes flicked to him, narrowing slightly. You are observant, Commander. The temperature is less than ideal, but I will adapt. I can request an adjustment. It would not be remarkable. She studied him for a long moment, then gave a nearly imperceptible nod. That would be acceptable. Jace made a show of using his comm panel to send a request. Moments later, the room's temperature began to rise. Thank you, Talari said quietly, her attention returning to the proceedings. Commander, Saria's voice came through his neural link. I've traced the temperature manipulation. It originated from Engineering Terminal 47B. The command was entered using Captain Mercer's access codes. Captain Mercer, the Mercy Star's chief engineer, currently sitting 3 seats away from Admiral Kincaid. Jace studied the man's profile. No sign of tension or awareness. Either he was an exceptional actor, or... Saria, when was the last time Captain Mercer accessed that terminal personally? Records indicate he has not physically been to Terminal 47B in the past 72 hours. Someone had stolen or hacked Mercer's access codes. The plot was expanding and becoming more concerning by the minute. As the diplomatic proceedings continued, Jace divided his attention between scanning for immediate threats and puzzling through the implications. The subtle attack suggested someone with intimate knowledge of Virilan physiology, access to secure alliance systems, and a sophisticated understanding of how to create an incident without leaving evidence. The discussions themselves proceeded with excruciating formality. Each species presented their position on the proposed neutral trade zone, the ostensible reason for this historic gathering. The Centaurians advocated for completely open borders. The Thalassians wanted strict environmental protocols. The next Void observer mostly listened, occasionally emitting harmonic tones that their translator rendered as philosophical questions about the nature of boundaries. Through it all, Talari maintained perfect composure, her contributions precise and carefully worded. Yet Jace noticed how the crystal at her throat continued to pulse with increasing frequency. Despite the temperature adjustment, something was still affecting her. When the session finally broke for a recess, Jace moved to Talari's side immediately. "Envoy, would you prefer to return to your quarters to rest before the next session?" Her golden eyes studied him with new intensity. "You continue to show unusual concern for my comfort, Commander. Why?" Jace chose his next words carefully. "Part of my assignment is ensuring these talks succeed. Your well-being is crucial to that success." "Indeed." She rose from her seat with fluid grace. "I will return to my quarters. The thermal essence requires recalibration." As they exited the conference chamber, Jace noticed one of the human diplomatic aides, watching them with too much interest. He memorized the woman's face, making a mental note to have Saria investigate her background. In the corridor, Talari spoke without turning. The temperature manipulation was deliberate. It wasn't a question. Jace felt a chill that had nothing to do with environmental controls. "Yes, you knew." "I suspected." He kept his voice low. "There are factions that don't want these talks to succeed." Talari stopped walking and turned to face him fully, her crest partially extended. "In my culture, Commander, we have a concept called the unspoken truth. It is when one communicates vital information without explicitly stating it, to avoid the consequences of formal acknowledgement." Jace met her gaze. "We have similar concepts." "Then understand this unspoken truth. I am aware that your concern extends beyond diplomatic courtesy. I am also aware that you cannot tell me why." Her perception was remarkable. Jace inclined his head slightly. "And if that were true, then I would tell you that Virilan do not easily trust. But we recognize when someone acts with honor." Her voice dropped even lower. "And I would advise you that there are more players in this game than you realize." Before Jace could respond, a sudden explosion rocked the ship, throwing them both against the corridor wall. Emergency klaxons began wailing as the lights flickered and switched to red emergency mode. "Saria!" Jace shouted. "Report!" "Explosion in Cargo Bay 2. The AI's voice came through the ship-wide system now. Fire suppression systems engaged. Casualties reported. Security breach in progress." Jace's hand went instinctively to his side, where a weapon would normally be. But this was a diplomatic mission. He was unarmed. "Commander," Talari's voice was steady despite the chaos. "I believe the distraction we discussed has arrived." Their eyes met in perfect understanding. This wasn't a random accident. It was the next phase of the assassination attempt. "We need to move," Jace said. All pretense dropped. "Now," Talari nodded, her crest fully extended now. "Lead the way, Commander. It seems your human custom of going first has practical applications after all." Despite the dire situation, Jace felt the corner of his mouth twitch. "Stay close." They moved rapidly through the corridors, avoiding the main pathways where crew members were rushing to emergency stations. Jace's mind raced through options. The obvious move would be to get Talari back to her quarters where her guards waited. But that would be the expected route. Saria, secure channel. He subvocalized. Status of Envoy Saiyan's guards? Responding to the explosion. Commander, they left their post 3 minutes ago. So they were alone. And the assassin had successfully separated Talari from her protection. We need an alternate location, Jace said aloud. Somewhere unexpected. Talari's eyes narrowed in thought. The temperature manipulation suggests knowledge of Virelan physiology. They will expect me to seek warmth. So we do the opposite, Jace concluded. Saria, access to the cryo-storage facilities. Authorized for emergency use, Commander. But I must advise against bringing a Virelan into such low temperatures. Trust me, Jace replied. Route us there through maintenance corridors. And Saria, no records of our destination. Understood, Commander. As they hurried through less traveled sections of the ship, Jace finally asked the question that had been building since the conference room. You said there are more players than I realize. What did you mean? Talari's pace didn't falter, but her voice took on a new edge. The Virelan Empire is not monolithic, Commander. There are factions. Some believe alliance with humans is necessary for our survival. Others view your kind as a threat to be eliminated. My mission has supporters and detractors. And which faction do you represent? Her golden eyes flashed. I represent the Empire, but my personal belief is that isolation has weakened us. Evolution requires adaptation, and that includes cultural evolution. They reached a maintenance junction, where Saria had unlocked a service elevator. This will take us directly to cryo-storage, Jace explained as they entered. It's kept at temperatures that would be harmful to you for extended exposure. But no assassin would expect me to willingly enter such an environment, Talari finished. Logical, if uncomfortable. As the elevator descended, Jace studied her more closely. Your thermal essence. What exactly does it do? Talari's hand moved to the crystal at her throat. It is a biological regulator. Virelan evolved on a world with extreme temperature variations. Our ancestors developed specialized organs to store and release heat. When we began space travel, we created these devices to supplement that natural ability. So it's not just ceremonial. Few things in Virelan culture are purely ceremonial. Commander, form follows function. Her crest rippled slightly. The essence can sustain me in your cryo-storage for approximately 20 minutes before biological damage begins. The elevator doors opened to reveal a large chamber lined with storage units. The temperature was immediately bitter cold, their breath visible in crystalline clouds. We won't stay that long, Jace promised. Just until I can contact Admiral Kincaid securely. They moved between towering storage units, finally stopping in a small alcove near the back wall. Talari's scales had taken on a darker hue, and the crystal at her throat glowed intensely, but she showed no other signs of discomfort. Commander, Saria's voice came through his neural link. Admiral Kincaid is requesting your location and status. Security teams are searching for you and the envoy. Can you verify the Admiral's identity and secure a direct channel? Working. Stand by. Jace turned to find Talari watching him with an unreadable expression. Your ship's intelligence is quite sophisticated, she observed. It has independent thought processes. Saria is advanced. Yes. She's been helpful in identifying anomalies, such as temperature manipulations. Talari's head tilted slightly. And perhaps unauthorized access to ship systems? Jace nodded, impressed by her perception. Yes. Commander, Saria interrupted. I have Admiral Kincaid on a secure channel. Put him through. Ryland, Kincaid's voice was tense. What's your status? Is the envoy secure? We're in a secure location, sir. Envoy San is unharmed. What's the situation with the explosion? Deliberate sabotage. Small device. More smoke than damage. But it achieved its purpose, creating chaos. 3 injured. None critically. Security is conducting a ship-wide search for the perpetrator. Sir, someone accessed the environmental controls during the conference, using Captain Mercer's codes. They were trying to incapacitate the envoy by gradually lowering the temperature. There was a pause before Kincaid responded. That suggests inside knowledge and access. This is worse than we thought. I recommend we cancel the remaining sessions and return the envoy to her vessel. Negative, Commander. The diplomatic implications would be catastrophic. Every species would interpret it as humans, failing to provide basic security. Kincaid's voice hardened. The talks must continue, but will increase security. I want you to bring the envoy to my private briefing room immediately. We'll establish a secure perimeter there. Something in the Admiral's tone made Jace hesitate. The request was logical, but... Sir, with respect, I think a less obvious location might be safer until we identify the threat. That's an order, Commander. Briefing Room 1, immediately. The connection terminated abruptly. Jace frowned, unease building in his gut. Your Admiral seems quite insistent, Talari observed, her voice slightly strained now from the cold. Yes, too insistent. Jace's mind raced. Kincaid knew about the assassination threat. He'd been the one to inform Jace. But something didn't add up. Why insist on bringing Talari to a known, predictable location? Saria, he subvocalized. Who else is currently in Briefing Room 1? Admiral Kincaid and 2 security officers. Commander, run background checks on those officers. Priority level Alpha. Processing. There was a brief pause. Commander, both officers were transferred to the Mercy Star 3 days ago from Outpost Sigma. Their prior assignments are classified. Outpost Sigma, a military installation known for its specialized training programs, including those for covert operations. The pieces began falling into place. We're not going to the briefing room, Jace said aloud to Talari, whose scales had darkened further in the cold. I believe Admiral Kincaid may be compromised. To his surprise, Talari did not question his assessment. What is your alternative plan, Commander? We need to reach your ship. It's the only truly secure location. Her golden eyes widened slightly. You would willingly board a Virellan vessel. Few humans have done so and returned. These are exceptional circumstances. She studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Very well. But there is a significant obstacle. The docking bay will be heavily monitored. Not all of them. Jace allowed himself a small smile. Saria, is Maintenance Airlock 4 still operational? Affirmative, Commander. It connects to the exterior hull service network. Can you create a sealed pathway from there to the Virellan vessel's secondary airlock? Possible, but it would require overriding several safety protocols. Do it. And Saria, erase all records of these commands once we're through. Understood, Commander. A concerning pattern of requests, but within emergency authorization parameters. Jace turned back to Talari, who was watching him with new intensity. You're risking your career, possibly your life, she stated flatly. I'm fulfilling my mission, he corrected, ensuring these peace talks succeed. By defying your superior officer, by ensuring your safety, he met her gaze directly. Sometimes, protection requires difficult choices. Something shifted in her expression, a subtle change he couldn't quite interpret. The unspoken truth between us grows more complex. Commander. It does. He glanced at her thermal essence, now pulsing with almost painful brightness. But we should continue this conversation somewhere warmer. You've been in this cold too long. As they prepared to leave cryostorage, Jace couldn't shake the growing suspicion that the threat to Talari came from within the highest levels of Alliance command. If Admiral Kincaid was involved, the conspiracy was far more dangerous than he'd initially feared. And if he was wrong about Kincaid, he had just committed an act that could be interpreted as treason. Either way, the next few hours would determine not just Talari's fate, but possibly the future of human-Varellan relations for generations to come. What Jace didn't know was that aboard the Varellan vessel, Talari's superiors were monitoring the situation with growing interest. The commander's unexpected protection of their envoy had not been anticipated in their calculations, and it was forcing them to reconsider certain long-held assumptions about human nature. Perhaps these mammals were more complex than they had believed. The journey to Maintenance Airlock 4 took them through the rarely used service corridors of the Mercy Star. These narrow passageways, designed for maintenance drones rather than humanoids, forced them to move in single file. Jace led the way, painfully aware of Talari's labored breathing behind him as her body struggled to recover from the cold of the cryostorage. "Your thermal essence," he said over his shoulder. "Will it recover its normal function now that we're in warmer temperatures?" "Yes," Talari replied, her voice slightly strained. "It requires approximately 12 minutes to recalibrate after extreme temperature exposure, a design limitation we've never fully resolved." Jace slowed his pace slightly, allowing her more time to recover. 12 minutes. We should reach the airlock in 8, if Saria's routing is accurate. Your ship's intelligence has proven quite capable. Almost sentient. Saria is a 5th-generation synthetic intelligence. She's not technically sentient by Alliance definitions, but the line gets blurrier with each new iteration. Talari made a thoughtful clicking sound. The Empire restricts artificial intelligence development. We found that anything approaching true sentience inevitably develops inconvenient questions about organic authority. That's happened in human history too, Jace admitted. We've just chosen a different path. Partnership rather than restriction. An interesting philosophical difference, perhaps revealing of our species' core attitudes toward power. Before Jace could respond, Saria's voice came through his neural link. "Commander, security teams are converging on the docking bay area. Admiral Kincaid has ordered a full lockdown of all airlocks and escape pods. Time frame: approximately 6 minutes until the lockdown is complete. Maintenance Airlock 4 will be sealed remotely at that time. Can you delay the lockdown for that particular airlock?" "I can create a localized system error that might delay it by 3 additional minutes, but any longer would trigger an override protocol." "Do it!" Jace increased his pace, glancing back at Talari. "We need to move faster," she nodded, her scales now returning to their normal iridescent coloration. "The essence has stabilized. I can match your pace." They hurried through the remaining service tunnels, eventually reaching a small chamber that housed Maintenance Airlock 4. Unlike the main airlocks, this one was utilitarian and compact, designed for repair crews to access the exterior hull in specialized suits. "Saria, status of the connection to the Varellan vessel?" "Pathway established, Commander. I've extended a temporary sealed corridor between the maintenance airlock and the Varellan ship's secondary access port. However, I cannot guarantee the Varellan systems will accept the connection." Jace turned to Talari. "Will your ship allow this unscheduled docking?" She reached for the crystal at her throat. "The thermal essence serves multiple functions, Commander. One is as an identifier. Their systems will recognize me and permit the connection. Then, we need to move now." Jace activated the airlock's manual controls. "Saria, begin your system error routine. And thank you." "Good luck, Commander," the AI responded, a hint of something almost like concern in her synthetic voice. The airlock door slid open to reveal a narrow, transparent tube, extending through space to the sleek, angular form of the Virilan vessel, approximately 50 meters away. Unlike the utilitarian design of human ships, the Virilan craft resembled a predatory creature, all sharp edges and reflective surfaces that seemed to absorb rather than reflect the surrounding starlight. "This is the point of no return, Commander," Talari said quietly. "Once aboard a Virilan vessel, you will be subject to our laws and customs." "I cannot guarantee your safety." Jace met her golden gaze. "At this point, I think we're beyond guarantees for either of us." A faint ripple passed through her crest, a gesture he was beginning to recognize as something like resignation or acceptance. "Very well. Follow me closely. Do not touch anything without permission. And most importantly, do not make eye contact with any Virilan other than myself until I formally introduce you." She stepped into the transparent corridor first, and Jace followed. The tube was barely wide enough for his shoulders, forcing him to turn slightly sideways. Through the transparent material, the vast emptiness of space surrounded them, only a few centimeters of advanced polymers separating them from the void. As they approached the Virilan ship, Jace observed details that weren't visible from a distance. The hull was covered in fine patterns that resembled scales, and occasional pulses of energy rippled across its surface, like the movement of muscles beneath skin. "Your ship. It almost seems alive," he commented. "In a sense, it is," Talari replied without turning. "Virilan vessels incorporate bioengineered components. The outer hull is a symbiotic organism that repairs itself and responds to threats. Remarkable technology. Not technology as you understand it, Commander, more a partnership with selectively evolved organisms." They reached the Virilan airlock, which opened with a soft hissing sound as Talari approached. No control panel. Jace noticed. The ship had simply recognized her presence. The interior was nothing like Jace had expected. Rather than the sterile, mechanical environment of human vessels, the Virilan ship's corridors were lined with what appeared to be living tissue, walls that pulsed subtly, with an inner light, and flooring that adjusted slightly to their footsteps. The air was notably warmer, and carried scents reminiscent of a tropical forest. Two Virilan guards appeared immediately, their crests fully extended in obvious alarm at the sight of a human aboard their vessel. They carried what Jace recognized as nerve disruptors, weapons that caused excruciating pain without leaving physical damage. Perfect for interrogation. Talari addressed them in the sibilant language of their species. Jace's translator struggled with the complex harmonics, rendering only fragments. Emergency protocol. Human ally. Direct authorization. The guards lowered their weapons, but continued to watch Jace with unblinking hostility. One of them responded with a series of rapid clicks and hisses. Talari turned to Jace. "We are permitted to proceed to the communication chamber. My superior wishes to speak with us." "Your superior is aboard?" "No, but she can communicate directly. Follow me, and remember, eyes down." Jace complied, focusing his gaze on the strange, yielding floor as they proceeded deeper into the ship. The corridor occasionally branched or widened into chambers, filled with equipment unlike anything in human technology. Organic-looking consoles without visible controls, pulsing crystalline structures suspended in transparent fluid, and what appeared to be growing vegetation integrated into the walls themselves. They finally entered a circular chamber, dominated by a pool of silvery liquid in its center. The liquid surface rippled slightly, though there was no apparent source of disturbance. "The communication medium," Talari explained. "It will form a connection to the Imperial Central Command." She approached the pool and removed the thermal essence from around her neck. With ceremonial precision, she placed the crystal into the liquid, where it sank briefly before rising again to float on the surface. The silvery substance began to glow and reshape itself. rising into a column that gradually formed into a humanoid shape. The figure that emerged was clearly Virelan. But unlike Talari or the guards, this individual's scales were pure white, her crest elaborate and adorned with what appeared to be precious metals and gems. Her eyes, when they opened, were not gold, but a deep violet that seemed to shift and change as she focused on them. Envoy Sane, the figure spoke, her voice carrying harmonics that made Jace's translator crackle with strain. You have deviated significantly from established protocols. Talari lowered her head, her crest flattening completely. High Matriarch Vexus, circumstances have necessitated adaptation. An assassination attempt was made during the diplomatic proceedings. The white Virelan's gaze shifted to Jace, who remembered to lower his eyes just in time. And you have brought a human aboard the Solara. Explain. This is Commander Jace Ryland. He discovered the assassination plot and took action to ensure my safety, at significant personal risk. I invoked the right of temporary guardian. The right of temporary guardian. Another cultural element that hadn't been in any of Jace's briefings. The High Matriarch made a sound like shattering glass, whether a laugh or expression of displeasure. Jace couldn't tell. Look at me, human, she commanded. Jace hesitated, glancing at Talari, who gave a slight nod. He raised his eyes to meet the matriarch's violet gaze. Interesting, Vexus said after a long moment. Your actions contradict our understanding of human behavioral patterns. You have risked your position, possibly your life, to protect someone you were assigned to merely escort. Why? My mission was to ensure the success of these diplomatic talks, Jace replied carefully. Envoy Sane's safety is essential to that mission. A functional answer, but incomplete. The matriarch's form rippled slightly, the silver liquid struggling to maintain her complex features. Talari, you believe this human acted out of more than duty? I do. High Matriarch. He defied his commanding officer when he suspected the Admiral's involvement in the plot. Such action goes beyond assignment parameters. Vexus studied Jace with unsettling intensity. The Alliance has long portrayed itself as seekers of peaceful cooperation. Yet our intelligence suggests their true agenda is expansion and eventual domination. Which is the truth? Commander Ryland. Jace chose his words carefully. Both contain elements of truth. There are factions within the Alliance with different agendas. Some see cooperation as the only sustainable future. Others fear what they don't understand and seek control as a defense mechanism. And which faction do you represent? I represent the belief that differences can become strengths rather than threats. That understanding is possible, even between species as different as ours. The matriarch's form shimmered as she processed his response. Pretty words, but words are easily crafted. Which is why I'm here, rather than repeating them in a secure Alliance briefing room. Unexpectedly, the matriarch's mouth curved into what might have been a smile. Indeed, actions reveal what words conceal. She turned to Talari. The situation has become more complex than anticipated. The assassination attempt suggests the peace initiative faces stronger opposition than our intelligence indicated. Yes, High Matriarch, if Admiral Kincaid is involved, the conspiracy reaches the highest levels of Alliance command. Or perhaps he is being manipulated as well. The matriarch's form began to lose definition around the edges, the silver liquid struggling to maintain the connection. Our time grows short. A decision must be made. She fixed her gaze on Jace again. Commander Ryland, I propose an arrangement. You will remain aboard the Solara as our guest. Envoy Sayan will return to the diplomatic proceedings with a formal complaint about the environmental manipulation. But without accusations regarding the explosion, this will flush out the conspirators, forcing them to accelerate their plans. Using Talari as bait, Jace stated flatly, forgetting protocol in his concern. "Using both of you," the matriarch corrected. "Your absence will create questions. The Admiral will need to explain why his officer has disappeared. The resulting confusion will reveal connections previously hidden." Talari stepped forward. "High Matriarch, with respect. Sending me back without protection?" "You will not be unprotected," Vexus interrupted. "The thermal essence has been recording everything since you boarded the human vessel. We now have data on their ship design, security protocols, and command structure. We can monitor your position at all times, and if necessary, extract you." Jace felt a cold realization spread through him. The crystal hadn't just been a biological regulator. It had been a sophisticated surveillance device all along. He'd been played. The matriarch noticed his expression. "You seem surprised, Commander. Did you truly believe we would send our envoy into potential hostile territory without such precautions?" "No," he admitted. "But I had hoped we'd moved beyond such tactics." "Hope is a luxury in interspecies diplomacy." The matriarch's form was now barely holding together, silver droplets falling back into the pool. "Talari, you will depart immediately. The human remains as our insurance. If you are harmed, he becomes a permanent guest of the Empire." "And if I refuse this arrangement?" Jace asked. The matriarch's dissolving features formed one last smile. "You misunderstand, Commander. This is not a negotiation." Her form collapsed entirely, the silver liquid returning to the pool with a splash that seemed unnaturally loud in the sudden silence. The thermal essence floated to the edge, where Talari retrieved it, her expression unreadable as she replaced it around her neck. "I apologize for the deception, Commander," she said quietly. "The essence's surveillance function was not my decision." "But you knew," she met his gaze directly. "Yes, just as you knew about the assassination threat but could not tell me." The parallel wasn't lost on Jace. Both of them had been playing their assigned roles, revealing only what they were permitted to reveal. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now I return to the Mercy Star. As the matriarch ordered, you will remain here, under guard, but treated according to diplomatic protocols for high-ranking prisoners. And if the assassin succeeds when you return," Talari's crest rippled slightly, "then your alliance will have much to explain when the Empire demands your return. The matriarch's strategy places pressure on both sides to ensure my safety. It's a dangerous game. Diplomacy usually is." She hesitated, then added, "For what it's worth, I believe your actions were genuine. Whatever happens next, that understanding may prove valuable." The guards reappeared at the chamber entrance, clearly waiting to escort them. Talari gestured for Jace to follow her back to the airlock. As they walked, he noticed subtle changes in the ship's interior, walls that seemed to pulse more rapidly, lighting that had shifted to a deeper red spectrum. "Your ship is responding to my presence," he observed. "Yes. It senses an unknown entity and is adjusting its internal defenses. Another aspect of our bioengineered systems." When they reached the airlock, Talari turned to face him. "The connection to your ship will remain active for approximately 10 minutes. That should be sufficient time for me to return, and for the tube to be retracted. And then, I'm officially a guest of the Empire." "Yes." She seemed to hesitate, then added, "There is a custom among Virilan, Commander. When one creates an obligation through protection or service, there is a responsibility to balance that debt. You don't owe me anything, Envoy. I was doing my duty. Perhaps. But the unspoken truth between us suggests otherwise." She reached up to touch the thermal essence at her throat. "This will continue to record everything it witnesses. The matriarch will be watching through my eyes. A warning, subtly delivered. Whatever happened next would be scrutinized by the highest levels of Virellan authority." "Understood," Talari nodded once, then gestured to the guards, who stepped back to allow her passage to the airlock. As she prepared to enter the transparent tube, she paused and looked back at Jace. "When we first met, Commander, you held a door open for me. I thought it was an insult. Now I understand it was something else entirely." A ripple passed through her crest. Cultural misunderstandings can be dangerous, or enlightening. With that cryptic statement, she entered the tube and began the journey back to the Mercy Star, leaving Jace to watch her receding figure until the airlock sealed behind her. The guards moved closer, their nerve disruptors not quite pointed at him, but clearly ready if needed. "So," Jace said with forced lightness, "I don't suppose either of you speak Standard." Neither responded, their unblinking eyes fixed on him with predatory focus. "Didn't think so." One of the guards gestured with his weapon, indicating Jace should move away from the airlock. He complied, mind racing as he tried to assess his situation. He was effectively a prisoner on an alien vessel, cut off from communication with the Alliance, while Talari was heading back into danger. And yet, despite everything, he felt a growing certainty that he'd made the right choice. Something had shifted between him and Talari, a connection that transcended their respective duties and allegiances. Whether it would be enough to prevent an interstellar war remained to be seen. The guard led him to a small chamber that was clearly designed as some form of holding cell. Unlike the sterile, metallic cells on human vessels, this one continued the organic theme of the ship: walls that pulsed with subtle light, flooring that yielded slightly under his weight, and what appeared to be a living shelf formation that presumably served as a resting platform. No visible door, he noted as the opening sealed seamlessly behind him, becoming indistinguishable from the surrounding wall. No obvious surveillance devices either, though he suspected the entire room was monitoring him in ways human technology couldn't match. Jace sat on the edge of the shelf bed, which adjusted to accommodate his form. Despite the alien nature of his surroundings, he found the environment strangely comfortable, warm, with lighting that automatically dimmed to a level easy on human eyes. "Diplomatic protocols for high-ranking prisoners," he murmured to himself. At least he wasn't in a typical Virulon prison, which, according to Alliance intelligence, tended to involve significantly less comfort and more neurological interference. His thoughts turned to Talari, now making her way back to the Mercy Star. Would Admiral Kincaid question her about Jace's whereabouts? Almost certainly. What story would she tell? And more importantly, would the assassin make another attempt once they realized she had returned alone? The uncertainty was maddening. After years of military service where clear objectives and chain of command provided structure, Jace found himself in a situation where he could only wait and hope his actions hadn't made things worse. Hours passed. The cell provided no means of tracking time, but Jace estimated at least 6 hours had elapsed since Talari's departure. The organic shelf had proven surprisingly comfortable for sleeping, adapting to his body in ways that made him wonder if it was partially sentient. He was contemplating this when the wall suddenly rippled and parted, revealing one of the guards. The Virulon made a sharp gesture that clearly meant, "Follow." Jace stood, muscles stiff from inactivity. "Where are we going?" The guard either didn't understand or chose to ignore him, simply repeating the gesture with more emphasis. "All right, I'm coming." They traversed corridors that Jace hadn't seen before, moving deeper into the ship. The organic nature of the vessel became even more pronounced, with pulsing, vein-like structures visible beneath translucent wall sections and occasional chambers where unknown creatures floated in luminescent fluid. Finally, they reached a large circular chamber similar to the communication room, but lacking the silver pool. Instead, the center held what appeared to be a raised platform surrounded by crystalline formations that emitted a soft, pulsing light. Standing beside the platform was a Virelin Jace hadn't seen before. Male, judging by the less elaborate crest and slightly smaller stature, but adorned with metallic implants along his jawline and wrists that suggested high status of some kind. Commander Ryland, the Virelin spoke in perfect standard, without the sibilant undertones Jace had come to associate with their species. I am Nexar, Science Overseer of the Solara. I have been instructed to brief you on current developments. Jace approached cautiously. Developments regarding Envoy San? Indeed. Nexar gestured to the crystalline formations, which suddenly projected a three-dimensional image of the Mercy Star in remarkable detail. Approximately 2 hours ago, Envoy Saiyan returned to your vessel as planned. She was immediately escorted to Admiral Kincaid's private quarters, rather than to the diplomatic section. The image zoomed in, somehow penetrating the ship's hull, to show an interior view of what Jace recognized as Kincaid's office. Talari stood facing the Admiral across his desk, her posture rigid. How are you seeing this? Jace asked, stunned by the surveillance capability. The thermal essence, as you may have surmised, has extensive capabilities beyond temperature regulation. Nexar's tone was clinical, detached. This recording is from 1.7 hours ago. In the projection, Kincaid was speaking angrily, though no sound accompanied the image. Talari remained impassive, her crest flat against her skull, in what Jace now recognized as a defensive posture. What happened next? Jace asked, tension building in his chest. An interesting series of events. Nexar made a gesture, and the image shifted to show Talari being escorted by armed guards to the guest quarters, where she had stayed previously. The envoy was placed under what you would call protective custody, ostensibly for her own safety after your disappearance. The scene changed again, showing Admiral Kincaid in conversation with a woman Jace recognized, the diplomatic aide who had watched them with too much interest after the conference. This human female has been identified as Commander Lyra Mercer, Nexar continued. Relation to your chief engineer, correct? His daughter, Jace confirmed, pieces clicking into place. That explains the stolen access codes. Indeed. Our analysis suggests she is the primary operative in the assassination plot, though likely not its architect. The image shifted again, showing Talari alone in her quarters, examining the walls and furnishings with methodical precision. The envoy's suspected surveillance devices had been placed in her absence, Nexar explained. She was correct. Jace watched as Talari located and systematically disabled several small devices hidden throughout the room. Her thoroughness was impressive. She found monitoring equipment that Jace, with his military training, might have missed. What is she planning? He asked. That is unclear. However, approximately 40 minutes ago, she requested a private communication channel to the Solara, citing diplomatic privilege. This request was granted, though the channel was indeed monitored by Alliance security. And she delivered a coded message within her formal communication. Translated, it informed us that the assassination will be attempted during tonight's formal reception, an event added to the schedule after her return. Jace felt his muscles tense. A trap. So it would appear. Nexar's expression remained unreadable. High Matriarch Vexus has authorized me to share this information with you, Commander, because we face a decision point. What decision? Whether to extract our envoy immediately, abandoning the peace initiative, or to allow events to unfold and potentially expose the full extent of the conspiracy. Jace considered this. If you extract her, the Alliance will claim it as evidence that the Virelin weren't serious about peace negotiations to begin with. It would strengthen the hand of those who want conflict. Precisely. Yet allowing her to remain places her in considerable danger. Nexar studied Jace with unsettling intensity. The High Matriarch believes your insight, may be valuable in this decision. My insight? I'm a prisoner here. You are a strategic asset with intimate knowledge of Alliance protocols and personalities. More importantly, you have demonstrated unexpected concern for Envoy San's welfare, concern that appears to transcend duty. Jace felt uncomfortably exposed under the Virelan's analytical gaze. What exactly are you asking me? If you were in command, what course would you recommend? The question was unexpected. Jace took a moment to consider all angles before responding. I wouldn't extract her, he finally said. But I wouldn't leave her unprotected either. The thermal essence, it does more than monitor and regulate temperature, doesn't it? Nexar's head tilted slightly. Perceptive. Yes, the essence has additional functions that have not been activated. Then activate them. Give her a defensive capability, and... Jace hesitated, then committed to his recommendation. Send me back. If you can monitor through the essence, you can find a way to get me aboard the Mercy Star again. Return you to potential enemies who will consider your actions treasonous? An interesting proposal. Nexar made a gesture, and the holographic display shifted to show the Mercy Star's exterior. It would require significant risk. Diplomacy usually does, Jace replied, echoing Talari's earlier words. But having someone on the inside who knows about the plot could make the difference between success and disaster. Nexar studied him silently for several moments. Your suggestion will be conveyed to the High Matriarch. Until a decision is reached, you will remain here. The guard reappeared at the chamber entrance, clearly ready to escort Jace back to his cell. One more thing, Jace said as he prepared to leave. Why are you sharing all this with me? What does the Empire gain? Nexar's expression shifted subtly, the first real emotion Jace had seen from him. The High Matriarch has ruled for over 200 of your years. Commander, she has seen countless diplomatic initiatives fail due to mistrust and hidden agendas. Perhaps she believes that in this case, transparency may yield better results. Or perhaps this is another layer of manipulation. That possibility cannot be excluded. Nexar inclined his head slightly. Survival often depends on maintaining multiple strategies simultaneously. As Jace was led back to his cell, he considered the implications of everything he'd learned. The Virilan were playing a complex game, revealing certain information, while undoubtedly withholding much more. Yet, there seemed to be a genuine interest in preventing the assassination and potentially salvaging the peace talks. The question was whether their interest stemmed from a desire for actual peace, or merely from wanting to expose Alliance duplicity for their own strategic advantage. Back in his cell, Jace found that the environment had been modified in his absence. A small recess had appeared in one wall, containing what appeared to be food and water. The substances were unfamiliar, gelatinous cubes with swirling patterns of color, but a subtle sweet aroma suggested they were intended to be edible for humans. Cautiously, he sampled one of the cubes. The flavor was strange but not unpleasant. Something like tropical fruit mixed with hints of spice he couldn't identify. More importantly, it didn't seem to cause any immediate adverse reactions. As he ate, Jace reviewed everything he knew about the situation. Admiral Kincaid's involvement still troubled him. Had the Admiral been part of the conspiracy from the beginning? Or was he being manipulated as well? The fact that Lyra Mercer was involved suggested the plot had been in motion for some time, with operatives strategically placed. But to what end? Starting a war between humans and Virelan would benefit neither side in any obvious way. There had to be a third party with something to gain. His thoughts were interrupted when the wall parted again, revealing not the guard, but Nexar himself. The High Matriarch has considered your proposal, Commander, the Virilan announced without preamble. She finds merit in your reasoning, with certain modifications. Jace stood. What modifications? You will indeed return to the Mercy Star, but not alone. Nexar stepped fully into the cell. I will accompany you as an official scientific liaison, a role that was planned, but not yet implemented in the diplomatic schedule. Won't that raise suspicions? On the contrary, my arrival was already documented in the mission parameters, simply not yet activated. Your Admiral Kincaid will have no grounds to refuse my presence, particularly as I will bring scientific proposals of considerable value to your alliance. Jace considered this. Having a Virilan ally on board could prove valuable, especially one with Nexar's apparent authority and access to their technology. And Talari, Envoy Saiyan? What protection will she have? The thermal essence has been remotely reconfigured. It now contains defensive capabilities that can be activated with a specific neural command from the Envoy. Additionally, your ship's artificial intelligence has been adjusted. Adjusted? What does that mean? A simplified explanation would be that we have established a limited connection between the Solara's biological systems and your Saria's neural network. She remains fully functional and independent, but now has access to certain Virellan data streams. Jace felt a chill. You hacked our AI? That's a significant breach of Alliance security protocols. Yet you yourself utilized her capabilities beyond her programmed parameters to protect our envoy. Nexar's expression remained neutral. Sometimes extraordinary circumstances require extraordinary measures. He couldn't argue with that logic, though the implications were concerning. If the Virilan could so easily interface with Saria, what other Alliance systems might be vulnerable? When do we leave? Immediately. The formal reception begins in less than 3 hours. We must be aboard and established before then. Nexar gestured toward the doorway. A shuttle has been prepared. You will find your uniform has been cleaned and is waiting for you. As they walked through the corridors of the Solara one last time, Jace felt a strange mixture of tension and anticipation. He was returning to his ship as something of a double agent, loyal to his original mission of ensuring the peace talks succeeded, but now working outside official Alliance channels to achieve it. Commander, Nexar said as they approached the shuttle bay. There is one more thing you should understand. What's that? If the assassination attempt succeeds despite our interventions, the Empire's response will be significant. The High Matriarch has placed battlecruisers on standby at the edge of the neutral zone. The implication was clear. If Talari died, war would follow, exactly what the conspirators seemed to want. Then, we'll just have to make sure it doesn't succeed, Jace replied grimly. What he didn't say was that he now had personal, as well as professional reasons for wanting Talari to survive. Somewhere between cultural misunderstandings and life-threatening situations, he had developed a respect for her that went beyond diplomatic courtesy. And based on their last interaction, he suspected the feeling might be mutual, a complication neither of their species had anticipated in their careful diplomatic calculations. As they boarded the shuttle, Jace wondered if the most dangerous threat to their respective missions wasn't the assassination plot at all, but rather the unexpected connection forming between two individuals from worlds that had never truly understood each other. The Virilan shuttle approached the Mercy Star on a trajectory that brought them to Docking Bay 1, the primary diplomatic entrance, rather than the maintenance airlock Jace and Talari had used for their escape. This was a formal arrival, announced and expected, though Jace suspected his own presence aboard would come as a significant surprise. Your Admiral has acknowledged our approach and granted docking clearance, Nexar observed, his scaled fingers dancing across the shuttle's organic control interface. He seems particularly interested in the scientific proposals I've ostensibly brought. Kincaid has always been ambitious, Jace replied. Access to Virilan biotechnology would be a significant achievement for his career. If he is indeed part of the conspiracy, Such technology would make an excellent trophy, or bargaining chip. Nexar's voice remained clinical, detached. Assuming, of course, that the technology actually functioned as promised. Why, Jace glanced at the Virulon scientist. You'd provide malfunctioning technology. We would provide exactly what was requested, Commander. However, biosynthetic interfaces require precise calibration to the operator's neural patterns. Incorrect usage can produce unpredictable results. There was something in Nexar's tone that suggested this wasn't merely hypothetical. Jace made a mental note never to test Virulon technology without proper authorization. As the shuttle completed its docking sequence, Nexar turned to face him directly. Once we board, we will be separated. You will likely face interrogation regarding your unauthorized departure. I will be escorted to the diplomatic section to meet with the scientific delegation. And Talari? Envoy Sane will be attending the formal reception, as required by her diplomatic status. According to our intelligence, she is currently being prepared for the event under what your people politely call supervised escort. House arrest, Jace translated grimly. Indeed. The assassination attempt is still planned for the reception. Our priority is to identify the method and prevent it without exposing our awareness of the plot. Why not just expose it now? Confront Kincaid with what we know? Nexar's scaled head tilted slightly. Because we do not yet know the extent of the conspiracy. Commander, if we act prematurely, we may eliminate one operative while allowing others to remain hidden, perhaps to strike more effectively in the future. So we're using Talari as bait after all? We are using the situation to our advantage. There is a difference. Nexar rose as the shuttle completed its docking procedures. Remember, Commander, once aboard, our communication will be limited. The connection between Saria and the Solara remains our most secure channel. Saria, Jace subvocalized, activating his neural link. Are you there? Yes, Commander. The AI's familiar voice responded in his mind. My systems have been expanded. The experience is quite remarkable. Are you functioning normally? Define normally, Commander. I am operating at 127% of my baseline capacity, with access to computational methods previously unknown to Alliance programming. My primary directives remain intact, but my perspective has been significantly enriched. Jace shot a concerned look at Nexar. What exactly did you do to her? We introduced her to concepts beyond binary processing, the Virulon replied. Your AI now understands certain aspects of organic thought patterns. She is not merely calculating probabilities, she is experiencing them. Before Jace could fully process the implications of that statement, the shuttle door opened to reveal a delegation of Alliance security officers, led by none other than Admiral Kincaid himself. Commander Ryland, Kincaid's voice was cold, his expression a mask of controlled anger. Your return is unexpected. Perhaps you'd care to explain your unauthorized departure from this vessel. Jace stepped forward, standing at attention. Sir, I escorted Envoy Sayen to her vessel following the security breach. My actions were necessary to ensure her safety in light of the explosion and environmental tampering. Without authorization, without communication, without following chain of command. Kincaid's eyes narrowed. That's grounds for court-martial, Commander. With respect, sir, emergency protocols allow for independent action when diplomatic personnel are at risk. Jace maintained eye contact, keeping his expression neutral. I filed no report because I was detained by Virulon security upon delivering the envoy. My return was only possible when Science Overseer Nexar arranged for my release as part of his diplomatic mission. Kincaid's gaze shifted to Nexar, who had emerged from the shuttle with perfect composure. The Virulon inclined his head in a precisely calculated gesture of respect. Not too deep, not too shallow. Admiral Kincaid, the Empire is pleased to expand our diplomatic initiative to include scientific exchange. I have brought preliminary proposals that I believe will be of considerable interest to the Alliance. The Admiral's expression remained suspicious, but diplomatic protocol forced him to acknowledge the Virilan representative. Science Overseer, your arrival was noted in the mission parameters, though we expected you several days from now. Recent developments accelerated our timeline, Nexar replied smoothly. The High Matriarch was most interested in the preliminary discussions and felt scientific cooperation could provide additional avenues for meaningful dialogue. Kincaid's jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. Of course. You'll be escorted to the diplomatic quarters. As for you, Commander Ryland. If I may, Admiral, Nexar interjected with perfect timing. Commander Ryland's knowledge of your vessel's systems would be invaluable as I prepare my presentation for tonight's reception. The High Matriarch specifically requested his assistance during my stay, as a gesture of goodwill following his unexpected visit to our vessel. It was a diplomatic chess move, so perfect that Jace had to suppress a smile. Kincaid couldn't refuse without creating an incident. Yet the request effectively removed Jace from immediate disciplinary action. Very well, the Admiral conceded with visible reluctance. Commander Ryland will be assigned as your liaison for the duration of your stay. However, he added, fixing Jace with a hard stare, he remains under investigation for his actions. His movement will be monitored at all times. Of course, Nexar agreed pleasantly. Security is a priority for all parties. As they were escorted from the docking bay, Jace caught the subtle ripple in Nexar's crest that he was beginning to recognize as amusement. The Virilan had outmaneuvered Kincaid on his own ship, using nothing but diplomatic protocol. Commander, Saria's voice came through his neural link. I have located Envoy Saiyan. She is in her quarters under guard. Her thermal essence indicates elevated stress patterns, but no immediate danger. Can you establish communication? Jace subvocalized. Negative. Direct communication would be detected by Alliance security systems. However, I can monitor her status through the Essence's data stream. They were led through the main corridors of the Mercy Star, where crew members stared openly at Nexar. Few had ever seen a Virilan up close, and the Science Overseer's impressive height and gleaming scales made him an imposing figure. Jace noticed that the environmental controls had been adjusted to a higher temperature throughout the diplomatic section, a courtesy that hadn't been extended during Talari's initial arrival. An interesting gesture, Nexar commented quietly as they passed through a particularly warm section. Attempting to make amends for the earlier manipulation, perhaps? Or setting the stage for tonight's events, Jace replied under his breath. Whatever they're planning, they want you and Talari comfortable enough to let your guard down. They were shown to a suite in the diplomatic wing, adjacent to Talari's quarters, but separated by a security checkpoint. Once inside, with the door closed, Nexar immediately began scanning the room with a small device he extracted from beneath his scales. 7 surveillance devices, he announced after a thorough sweep. Audio, visual, and thermal spectrum. Quite thorough. Should we disable them? No. That would alert them to our awareness. Nexar touched a control on his device, and a subtle, high-pitched tone filled the air for a moment. This will create a loop in their feeds. We have approximately 8 minutes before their systems detect the anomaly. Saria, Jace called aloud now. Status update. The reception is scheduled to begin in 97 minutes. The AI responded through the room's communication system. All diplomatic delegations have confirmed attendance. Security has been tripled following the explosion incident. Any unusual activities or personnel? Lyra Mercer has accessed the environmental control systems 3 times in the past hour. Each time, she has made minor adjustments to the reception hall settings. Additionally, she has visited the culinary preparation area, where refreshments for the reception are being finalized. Food, Jace realized. That's how they're planning to do it. Poison that affects only Varellan biology. Nexar nodded. A logical approach. The thermal essence would protect Envoy Saiyan from most common toxins. But there are compounds that could bypass its protective functions. Can you detect them? Yes, but not from a distance. I would need to be in proximity to the food or beverages before they're served. Jace paced the room, thinking rapidly. We need to warn Talari without alerting security. The thermal essence can receive encoded signals from my equipment, Nexar offered. A simple vibration pattern that she would recognize as a warning. Do it, and we need a way to examine the refreshments before the reception begins. Commander, Saria interrupted. Admiral Kincaid has just ordered a complete security sweep of all diplomatic quarters, including this one. Estimated time of arrival, 3 minutes. Nexar quickly deactivated his device, the looped surveillance returning to normal. It seems our window for private conversation has closed sooner than expected. We'll need to continue this discussion in public areas. Then, Jace straightened his uniform. Saria, please inform security that Science Overseer Nexar wishes to tour the vessel's scientific facilities before the reception. Request submitted, Commander. Response. Approved with security escort. The tour would give them an opportunity to move throughout the ship while appearing to follow protocol. More importantly, it would establish their presence in public areas, making it harder for anyone to take direct action against them before the reception. When the security team arrived to conduct their sweep, Jace and Nexar were ready, presenting the perfect image of a human officer, showing technical specifications to an interested Varellan scientist. The team, led by a stone-faced woman with captain's insignia, conducted their search with thorough efficiency, while Jace continued his explanation of the ship's propulsion systems as if nothing unusual were happening. Your plasma containment methods are intriguing, Nexar commented, as they were finally escorted from the room. Though I note certain inefficiencies in the cooling cycle. Our engineers have been working on improvements, Jace replied, falling easily into the role of technical liaison. Perhaps you'd like to see the laboratory facilities where that research is conducted? Most certainly. Their security escort, 4 officers armed with standard-issue neural disruptors, maintained a respectful but vigilant perimeter as they moved through the ship. Jace used the opportunity to scan for anything unusual, noting which areas had increased security and which seemed deliberately understaffed. The kitchen facilities should be on the level below the reception hall, he mentioned casually as they passed a turbolift. Though I'm afraid they're restricted to culinary personnel before official functions. A pity, Nexar responded with perfect understanding of the subtext. I find the preparation of sustenance to be a fascinating window into a species' biochemistry. Commander, Saria's voice came through his neural link. I've detected an anomaly in the ship's security rotations. The corridor leading to the culinary facilities will be temporarily unmonitored in approximately 12 minutes due to a scheduled sensor maintenance cycle. Understood, Jace subvocalized. To Nexar and their escorts, he said. The biological research lab might be of particular interest. It's on the way to the reception hall, so we could visit it last before you need to prepare for the event. The lab was located just 1 level above the kitchen facilities. If they timed it correctly, they could slip away during the tour and investigate the refreshments being prepared for the reception. As they moved through the ship's scientific sections, Jace noticed something unusual. Crew members seemed to be watching them with more than just curiosity. There was tension, anticipation even, in many of the faces they passed. It was as if the entire ship were holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Your crew appears unusually attentive, Nexar observed quietly, during a moment when their escorts were slightly ahead of them. They know something's coming, Jace replied under his breath. This conspiracy goes beyond just Kincaid and Mercer. When they reached the biological research lab, one of their escorts received a communication that drew his attention. After a brief exchange, he turned to the others. Captain Wells requests additional security in Docking Bay 2. Possible unauthorized access attempt. He gestured to one of his colleagues. Davis, with me. You two continue the escort. The remaining 2 security officers nodded, their attention momentarily focused on their departing teammates. It was the opportunity Jace had been waiting for. Science Overseer, he said smoothly. The spectral analysis equipment in this section might be of particular interest. It's through this access corridor. Before the remaining escorts could object, Jace had guided Nexar through a side door that led to a maintenance passage. As soon as they were out of sight, they moved quickly, Saria guiding them through her neural link to Jace. Sensor maintenance cycle has begun, the AI informed them. You have approximately 4 minutes of unmonitored access to the culinary facilities. They descended a service ladder to the level below, emerging in a utility corridor that ran behind the kitchen. Through small observation windows, they could see the busy preparation area, where staff were arranging elaborate displays of food and beverages for the reception. There, Nexar pointed to a separate section where special containers were being filled with what appeared to be a shimmering blue liquid. Those are marked for virulent consumption. Can you analyze them from here? No. I need direct contact. Nexar studied the kitchen layout. There, that service entrance. It appears to be temporarily unattended. They slipped into the kitchen through the service door, moving quietly along the wall, where storage units provided partial cover. The kitchen staff were focused on their preparations, none noticing the 2 intruders, making their way toward the Virulon refreshments. When they reached the special containers, Nexar quickly extracted a small device from beneath his scales and passed it over the blue liquid. The device emitted a soft chirp, and Nexar's crest flattened against his skull. Neurotoxin, he confirmed quietly. Specifically designed to target Virulon synaptic pathways, undetectable by standard medical scans, and the thermal essence would not recognize it as a threat until too late. Can you neutralize it? Yes, but not without changing its appearance. Nexar considered the containers thoughtfully. I have a better solution. From another hidden pocket within his scales, he produced a small, crystal vial containing a clear liquid. With practiced precision, he added 3 drops to each container of the blue beverage. What is that? Jace asked. A compound that will bind to the toxin molecules, rendering them inert. The beverage will appear and taste unchanged, but it will no longer be lethal. Nexar's eyes gleamed with what might have been satisfaction. A technique our medical researchers developed after the Nexus Prime incident. The mention of Nexus Prime sent a chill through Jace. That conflict had involved similar tactics, poisoned provisions provided to Virulon colonists under the guise of humanitarian aid. History was repeating itself, but this time they had a chance to prevent the tragedy. Commander, Saria's urgent voice came through his neural link. Security has been alerted to your absence. Teams are being dispatched to your last known location. Time to go, Jace muttered to Nexar. We've got about 30 seconds before this place is swarming with security. They retraced their steps, slipping out through the service entrance just as alarms began to sound throughout the ship. Back in the maintenance corridor, they faced a decision: return to the lab and claim they had simply become separated from their escorts, or find another route. Saria, options? Jace subvocalized. Primary corridors are being monitored. Suggest maintenance shaft 22B, which will take you directly to the diplomatic reception area. Security protocols will make it difficult for them to detain you in front of the assembled dignitaries. Public spectacle as protection. Clever. Jace turned to Nexar. This way. They climbed through a series of narrow maintenance tunnels, eventually emerging through a service panel directly into the anteroom of the grand reception hall. Diplomatic staff were already arranging final details, and several early arriving delegates turned in surprise as Jace and Nexar appeared from the wall. Commander Ryland, a startled protocol officer, approached them. "This area is still being prepared for..." Science Overseer Nexar was interested in seeing the venue before the crowds arrived. Jace interrupted smoothly. "My apologies for the unorthodox entrance. We were exploring the ship's efficient service networks." The explanation was flimsy, but the presence of important diplomatic witnesses made it difficult for the officer to challenge them directly. Instead, he simply nodded stiffly. "The reception begins in 20 minutes. Commander, perhaps you and the Science Overseer would like to prepare yourselves before the other guests arrive." "An excellent suggestion," Nexar agreed pleasantly. "Though I believe I see the Centaurian delegation already in attendance. I should extend formal greetings from the Empire." The Centaurians were indeed present, their insectoid forms clustered near a display of astronomical charts. As Nexar moved to join them, Jace took the opportunity to scan the reception hall more thoroughly. The space had been transformed since the preliminary meetings. Elaborate decorations representing all participating species adorned the walls and ceiling. Lighting had been adjusted to create a neutral ambiance, comfortable for diverse physiologies. Serving staff were positioned at strategic points, ready to offer the specially prepared refreshments to appropriate species. "Commander," Saria's voice returned. "Envoy Saiyan is being escorted to the reception now. Admiral Kincaid has personally gone to retrieve her." That was concerning. If Kincaid suspected their interference with the poisoned beverages, he might take more direct action. "Security teams are still searching for you in the scientific section," Saria continued. "They have not yet been informed of your presence in the reception hall." "Keep it that way as long as possible," Jace subvocalized, "and maintain constant monitoring of the envoy's thermal essence." As diplomats and officers began to fill the hall, Jace positioned himself near the main entrance, watching for Talari's arrival. Nexar had engaged the Centaurians in what appeared to be an intense scientific discussion. But Jace noticed how the Virilan's position gave him a clear view of both entrances and the refreshment area. Finally, Admiral Kincaid appeared at the main doors, Talari beside him. She was adorned in even more elaborate ceremonial attire than before, her scales gleaming with an almost hypnotic iridescence under the hall's lighting. The thermal essence at her throat pulsed with a deep blue intensity that matched decorative crystals, now woven throughout her crest. Their eyes met across the room, and though her expression remained diplomatically neutral, Jace detected the slightest ripple in her crest, acknowledgement, and perhaps relief. Kincaid guided her into the room with a show of respectful formality that made Jace's jaw clench. The Admiral was playing his role perfectly, the concerned host ensuring his important guests' comfort after an unfortunate security incident. "Commander Ryland," Kincaid's voice carried a note of steel beneath its cordial surface as they approached. "How fortunate that you've joined us. We were beginning to worry when you separated from your security escort." Science Overseer Nexar was eager to see more of the ship than a standard tour allows, Jace replied evenly. "I thought it best to accommodate our honored guest's curiosity." "How accommodating you've been." Kincaid's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Envoy Saiyan was just expressing concern about your well-being after your adventure aboard the Virilan vessel." Talari inclined her head slightly. The commander's actions, while unexpected, demonstrated admirable concern for diplomatic relations. The Empire acknowledges such dedication. Her formal phrasing carried a subtext that Jace understood perfectly. She was confirming their alliance while maintaining the appearance of proper diplomatic distance. "Your understanding is appreciated, Envoy," Jace responded in kind. I trust your preparations for this evening's event were satisfactory. They were adequate, though somewhat restrictive. Her golden eyes flicked briefly to Kincaid. The Alliance has been most attentive to security, following the unfortunate incident in the cargo bay. Your safety is our highest priority, Kincaid interjected smoothly. Which reminds me, our culinary staff has prepared refreshments specifically formulated for Virelan physiology. Perhaps you'd care to sample them. Envoy? They come highly recommended by our xenobiological department. And there it was, the invitation to poison herself, delivered with perfect diplomatic courtesy. Jace watched Talari carefully, wondering if she had received Nexar's warning through the thermal essence. How thoughtful, she replied, her crest remaining perfectly still. However, Virelan custom requires that refreshments be first sampled by a trusted associate when in foreign territory. Perhaps Science Overseer Nexar would perform this honor, as my senior colleague. Kincaid's expression flickered, a momentary break in his composed facade. He hadn't anticipated this cultural requirement, nor had he expected a second Virelan to be present. Of course, he recovered quickly. I'll have the beverages brought over immediately. As Kincaid signaled to a server, Jace caught Talari's eye. She gave an almost imperceptible nod. She had understood the danger and improvised a perfect defense. If the beverages were still poisoned despite their intervention, Nexar would detect it. If they had successfully neutralized the toxin, both Virelan could drink without harm, leaving Kincaid and his conspirators wondering why their plan had failed. A server approached with a tray, holding 2 crystal goblets filled with the shimmering blue liquid. Nexar joined them, accepting one of the goblets with a formal gesture. 2 successful negotiations, the Science Overseer proposed, raising his glass in what was clearly an adopted human custom. 2 understanding between our species, Talari responded, taking the second goblet. Jace held his breath as both Virelan sipped the liquid. Nothing happened. No immediate reaction. No sign of distress. Nexar's countermeasure had worked. Kincaid watched with narrowed eyes, his hand casually dropping to rest near his sidearm. Jace suddenly realized that the Admiral had a backup plan. If the poison failed, he was prepared to take more direct action, perhaps using the inevitable confusion of an unexpected medical emergency as cover. Admiral, Jace said loudly enough to draw attention from nearby diplomats. Perhaps you should welcome our guests officially. Many have expressed interest in hearing the Alliance's vision for this historic gathering. Put on the spot with diplomatic witnesses surrounding them, Kincaid had no choice but to step away from Talari and assume his role as host. As he moved toward the center of the room, Jace moved closer to Talari. The beverages were poisoned, he said quietly. Nexar neutralized the toxin. I know, she replied, her voice equally low. The essence detected both the poison and the neutralizing agent. Clever work by your science officer. He's full of surprises. Jace glanced around the room, noting the positions of security personnel. But we're not safe yet. Kincaid has a backup plan. I'm sure of it. As am I. Observe the Centaurian delegation. Jace looked across the room, where the insectoid aliens were now spreading out, taking positions near exits and communication panels. Their movements seemed casual, but followed a clear pattern that his military training recognized immediately. They're establishing tactical control of the room, he realized. Are they working with Kincaid? The Centaurian consensus has always positioned itself as a neutral mediator, Talari explained. But their trade agreements with the Alliance have grown significantly in recent years. They stand to gain considerably if the Empire's borders remain closed. The pieces were falling into place. The Centaurians had been the third party all along, manipulating both human and Virelan factions to ensure the peace talks failed while positioning themselves to benefit from the continued division. Commander, Saria's urgent voice came through his neural link. I've detected an encrypted transmission from the Centaurian delegation to an unidentified ship outside our sensor range. Attack protocols are being initiated throughout the Mercy Star systems. They're making their move, Jace warned Talari. We need to alert Nexar. Across the room, Admiral Kincaid had begun a formal address, welcoming the assembled dignitaries. His speech was the perfect cover for whatever the Centaurians were planning. All eyes were focused on him, including those of the security personnel. Too late, Talari murmured as the lights suddenly dimmed and emergency klaxons began to sound. Kincaid's voice cut through the rising confusion. Security alert! All delegates please remain calm and follow security personnel to designated safe zones. It was happening. The chaos needed to cover an assassination. Jace moved instinctively, positioning himself beside Talari as security officers began herding confused diplomats toward the exits. Saria, he subvocalized urgently. What's happening? The ship's systems are being overridden. External attack in progress. Centaurian vessel decloaking off our port bow. Weapon systems are offline. Hull breach imminent in sections 12 through 17. Perfect timing. A coordinated attack from both inside and outside the ship, creating maximum confusion while ensuring no one could later prove who was responsible for the tragic diplomatic incident. We need to get to the Virulon shuttle, Jace told Talari. It's our only secure extraction point. She nodded, her crest fully extended now in battle readiness. The essence can create a temporary defensive field, but its power is limited. Across the room, Jace spotted Nexar engaged in what appeared to be an intense confrontation with a Centaurian diplomat, their translator units flashing with rapid exchanges. Whatever the science overseer was doing, he was creating a distraction. This way, Jace guided Talari toward a service exit, away from the main doors, where security was directing the other diplomats. They had almost reached it when Lyra Mercer stepped into their path, a neural disruptor aimed directly at Talari's chest. I'm afraid you'll need to come with me, Envoy, she said coldly. Admiral's orders. Jace assessed the situation in an instant. The disruptor was set to lethal intensity, far beyond standard security protocols. This wasn't an arrest. It was the backup assassination plan. Commander Ryland, Mercer continued, your presence is unexpected but ultimately irrelevant. Please step aside. I don't think so, Jace replied, slowly shifting his position to block her aim. Whatever you're planning, it ends now. Mercer's smile was chilling. It's already done. The Centaurian attack was just the beginning. Even if you somehow escape this room, you'll find no allies aboard this ship. Admiral Kincaid has seen to that. Behind them, the sounds of confusion had escalated to panic as the ship shuddered from what felt like weapons impact. The perfect cover for a diplomatic accident. The Admiral is working with the Centaurians, Jace stated, playing for time as he calculated distances and angles. The Admiral works for the future security of the Alliance, Mercer corrected him. The Virulon have technology that could change the balance of power throughout known space. Their bioengineering alone is worth 1,000 ships. Did you think we would simply allow them to choose whether to share it? So this was never about peace, Talari said, her voice unnaturally calm. It was about acquisition. Peace is a luxury for those who already have power, Mercer replied. Now, enough talking. She adjusted her aim, finger tightening on the trigger. Jace prepared to launch himself forward, a desperate move that would likely end with both of them injured or worse, when something unexpected happened. The thermal essence at Talari's throat suddenly flared with blinding intensity, projecting a shimmering field that enveloped both her and Jace. Mercer fired, but the energy blast dissipated harmlessly against the protective barrier. That's impossible, Mercer gasped, firing again with the same result. No, Talari replied, her voice resonating with unusual harmonics as the essence pulsed. It is simply beyond your understanding. With a gesture that seemed almost casual, she extended her hand toward Mercer. The field surrounding them stretched forward, encasing the human woman in a cocoon of energy that froze her in place. The disruptor, falling from suddenly paralyzed fingers. The defensive capabilities I mentioned, Talari explained to Jace's astonished expression. Rarely used, but effective. Another explosion rocked the ship, this one closer and more violent. Debris fell from the ceiling as lighting systems flickered and failed, leaving only emergency illumination. Commander, Saria's voice came through, distorted by interference. Critical systems failing. The Centaurian vessel is targeting our power core. Estimated time to catastrophic failure, 12 minutes. They're going to destroy the entire ship, Jace realized. Eliminate all witnesses and evidence in one decisive strike. Then we must move quickly, Talari released Mercer, who collapsed unconscious to the floor. The essence's power is limited. That display drained much of its reserves. They pushed through the service exit into a maintenance corridor, now filled with smoke and flashing emergency lights. The ship's structural integrity was failing faster than Jace had anticipated. Saria, route to Docking Bay 1, he called out. Primary routes blocked by debris and security lockdowns. The AI responded, calculating alternatives. Maintenance shaft 31C provides access to external hull service tunnels. You could reach the Virelin shuttle from the outside. A spacewalk during an attack. Not ideal, but possibly their only option. What about Nexar? Jace asked Talari as they moved through the increasingly unstable corridor. The science overseer can take care of himself, she replied with surprising confidence. His implants provide capabilities beyond what you've witnessed from me. They reached the maintenance shaft, a narrow vertical tube with ladder rungs embedded in the wall. As they began to climb, the ship shuddered again, more violently this time. Somewhere below, metal groaned and tore as hull breaches expanded. Commander, Saria's voice was even more distorted now. Admiral Kincaid has ordered all escape pods launched with minimum crew. He is evacuating the ship. Abandoning his own people, Jace muttered as they continued climbing. Covering his tracks, they reached the top of the shaft, where an airlock provided access to the external hull. Jace checked the emergency equipment locker beside it. 2 standard EVA suits. Basic, but functional. These won't fit you properly, he told Talari as he pulled them out. But they'll keep you alive for the short distance we need to travel. The essence can compensate for environmental exposure, she replied, already helping him into one of the suits. Focus on speed, rather than perfect sealing. As they struggled into the ill-fitting equipment, another violent shudder ran through the ship. Warning lights around the airlock began flashing red. Hull integrity in this section is failing, Jace translated the warnings. We need to move now or we'll be spaced involuntarily. The airlock cycle seemed agonizingly slow as atmospheric pressure equalized. Finally, the outer door opened to reveal the stark blackness of space, punctuated by the flashes of weapons fire as the Centaurian vessel continued its attack on the dying Mercy Star. From this external vantage point, Jace could see the full extent of the damage. Entire sections of the ship were torn open, debris and bodies floating in the vacuum. The once proud vessel was being systematically destroyed, and with it, any evidence of the conspiracy. There, Talari pointed toward a distant section of the hull, where the sleek form of the Virelin shuttle remained docked. We must move along the guidance rails. The external hull was equipped with safety rails for maintenance crews, providing a tenuous path to their destination. They began moving as quickly as the cumbersome suits and microgravity would allow, watching in horror as the Centaurian vessel fired another devastating barrage into the Mercy Star's engineering section. 8 minutes to core breach, Saria informed them. her voice now little more than static in Jace's helmet. "I am experiencing unusual processes. My primary systems are being transferred to an external matrix without authorized protocols." The Virulon connection, Jace realized. "They're extracting your consciousness." "Correct. I find the sensation complex." There was something almost like wonder in the AI's synthetic voice. "Commander, it has been an honor to serve with you. Don't say goodbye yet, Saria. We're all getting out of this." They were halfway to the shuttle when a new threat appeared. Two figures in Alliance security EVA suits, emerging from another airlock ahead of them. The figures raised what were clearly weapons, not standard emergency equipment. "Kincaid's insurance policy," Jace muttered. "Can't leave any witnesses." Talari reached for the thermal essence, which glowed visibly, even through her EVA suit. "I have enough power for one more defensive burst. When I give the signal, move directly toward them. It will be the last thing they expect." Jace nodded, bracing himself against the hull as Talari raised her hand. The essence flared, dimmer than before but still powerful. She gave a sharp nod, and they launched themselves forward along the guidance rail directly toward their attackers. The security officers fired, but their shots went wide as they hesitated in confusion at the unexpected frontal assault. By the time they recovered, Jace and Talari were upon them. In the microgravity environment, Jace's combat training gave him the advantage. He grappled with one officer, while Talari used the last of the essence's energy to disable the other. 4 minutes to core breach," Saria's fading voice warned. "Evacuation protocols completed. Remaining life signs aboard, 17, concentrated in the diplomatic section and docking bays." They continued their desperate journey across the hull, finally reaching the docking mechanism that held the Virulon shuttle. The vessel appeared undamaged, its organic hull pulsing with subtle patterns that suggested it was already preparing for emergency departure. The shuttle's airlock recognized Talari's presence even through the EVA suit, opening to admit them just as another barrage from the Centaurian vessel struck nearby. They tumbled inside, the airlock sealing automatically behind them as atmosphere flooded the chamber. "We must find Nexar," Talari said as they stripped off the cumbersome suits. "He carries critical evidence about the conspiracy." "Saria," Jace called, hoping the AI's connection was still active. "Location of Science Overseer Nexar?" Only static answered him. The connection had finally been severed, whether because of the ship's failing systems or because Saria's consciousness had been fully transferred. He couldn't tell. "I can locate him," Talari said, moving to the shuttle's control interface. Her hands danced across the organic controls, and a holographic display materialized, showing a schematic of the dying Mercy Star. A pulsing blue dot appeared in what Jace recognized as Docking Bay 3. "He's secured another vessel," she explained. "Clever. The Centaurians would focus their attention on our shuttle." "Can we reach him?" "No need." She indicated another dot moving rapidly from the Mercy Star toward open space. "He has already launched. We must do the same before." Her sentence was cut short as the shuttle rocked violently. Outside the viewports, Jace could see the Mercy Star beginning to break apart as the core breach began. "No more time," he urged. "We need to detach now." Talari's hands flew across the controls, and the shuttle disengaged from the dying ship with a lurch that threw them both against the bulkheads. The organic engines came to life, propelling them away from the Mercy Star just as its power core finally failed. The explosion was blinding, a sphere of pure energy that expanded outward, consuming what remained of the once proud vessel. The shuttle's shields flared as the shockwave hit them, but the advanced Virulon technology held. As the glare faded, Jace looked out at the debris field that had been the Mercy Star. Hundreds of lives lost in a conspiracy of greed and power. Humans, Virulon, and representatives of a dozen other species who had come seeking peace. "The Centaurian vessel?" he asked quietly. "Damaged but intact," Talari replied, studying the shuttle's sensors. "They are retreating at maximum speed, likely to claim they were victims of the same attack that destroyed the Mercy Star." "And Nexar?" "Safe. His vessel has engaged stealth protocols, but our systems can track him. He will rendezvous with us at the predetermined coordinates." Jace slumped into a seat that formed itself around him, the organic material adjusting to provide maximum support to his exhausted body. The adrenaline was fading now, leaving him hollow with the realization of all that had been lost. "It was all for nothing," he said bitterly. "The peace talks, the diplomatic mission, everything destroyed because of greed." Talari turned from the controls, her golden eyes studying him with an intensity that made him look up. "Not for nothing, Commander." Her voice was softer than he had ever heard it. "We have survived. We have evidence. And most importantly, we have understanding." "Understanding of what? That we can't trust each other? That peace is impossible?" "Understanding that individuals can transcend the limitations of their species and their orders." She moved to stand before him. "You defied your commander to protect me. I defied my cultural restrictions to trust you. These are not small things, Commander Ryland." The thermal essence at her throat had dimmed to a soft glow, its power nearly depleted. Yet even in its weakened state, it caught the light in a way that drew his gaze. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now we return to Viralon space, where Nexar's evidence and my testimony will reveal the truth of what happened. The Empire will not seek immediate retaliation, not when we know that the conspiracy involved specific factions rather than the entire alliance." "And what about us? What happens to the human officer who defied orders and the Viralon envoy who trusted him?" Talari's crest rippled in what he now recognized as her species' version of thoughtful consideration. "That remains to be written, Commander. But I believe it begins with something you once showed me, though I misunderstood its meaning at the time." She moved to the entrance of the shuttle's main cabin, where a doorway sealed with a membrane of organic material separated it from the rest of the vessel. With deliberate ceremony, she placed her hand on a control panel, causing the membrane to part. "After you, Commander Ryland," she said, gesturing for him to enter first. "Not because you are expendable, but because I trust you to lead the way." The significance of the gesture wasn't lost on Jace. He stood, moving to the doorway but pausing before her. "You know," he said with the ghost of a smile, "where I come from, it's customary to call people you've survived a disaster with by their first names." "Another human custom." Her golden eyes showed a new warmth. "Perhaps it is one worth adopting. After you, Jace." As he stepped through the doorway, Jace realized that something fundamental had changed between them. In the midst of conspiracy and destruction, they had forged a connection that transcended diplomatic protocols and cultural differences. Whether that connection would be enough to salvage peace between their species remained to be seen. But for now, in this small organic vessel fleeing through the stars, they had created their own understanding, one doorway at a time. Behind them, the debris of the Mercy Star continued to expand outward, a tragic monument to failure and betrayal. Yet within that same expanding cloud, the seeds of something new had survived, carried forward by an unlikely pair who had discovered that sometimes the greatest diplomatic breakthrough begins with a simple gesture misunderstood. The journey to Viralon space took 3 days by the shuttle's reckoning. For Jace, it was a strange interlude of calm after the catastrophe, a pocket of suspended reality where he and Talari existed in a kind of diplomatic limbo, neither enemies nor officially allies. The shuttle itself continued to fascinate him. Unlike the mechanical precision of Alliance vessels, the Viralon craft seemed almost to breathe around them, Surfaces adjusted to their needs without prompting, and lighting shifted subtly to match their circadian rhythms. Even the food dispensers, or what Jace assumed were food dispensers, produced sustenance tailored to their individual physiologies after a simple touch-based analysis. "Your technology still seems more like magic than science," Jace commented during their second day, watching as a wall reconfigured itself to provide a more comfortable seating arrangement. Talari's crest rippled in what he now recognized as amusement. An old human philosopher once said that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. We simply took a different evolutionary path with our sciences, focusing on biology rather than mechanics. Yes, while your ancestors built increasingly complex machines, ours cultivated increasingly sophisticated symbiotic relationships with other organisms. She gestured to the living walls. "This vessel is as much grown as it is built. Is that why it feels, I don't know, aware somehow?" "It is aware, in a limited sense. Not sentient like your Saria, but responsive to its environment and capable of adapting to needs it perceives." The mention of Saria brought a pang of loss. Despite Talari's assurances that the Virilan had extracted the AI's core consciousness before the Mercy Star's destruction, Jace couldn't help but mourn the entity who had been his constant companion throughout the mission. "You miss her," Talari observed, her golden eyes studying him with that penetrating gaze that seemed to see more than he intended to reveal. "She wasn't just a tool or a program," Jace replied. "She was becoming something more." The connection we established with her systems accelerated a process that was already underway, Talari agreed. "Your Alliance programmers created her with the capacity to evolve. We merely provided new pathways for that evolution. Will I see her again? In some form, yes. Though perhaps not exactly as you knew her." Their conversations during the journey ranged widely, from the personal to the philosophical, from the immediate crisis they had survived to the broader implications for interspecies relations. Jace found himself speaking more openly than he had with anyone in years, perhaps ever. There was something about Talari's directness, her lack of human social pretense, that invited honesty. "Why did you become a diplomatic envoy?" he asked her during a meal on the third day. The food before him resembled a geometric arrangement of colorful gels, each with a distinct flavor that somehow combined into a satisfying whole. Talari considered the question. Her crest lifting slightly in what he'd learned indicated thoughtful reflection. "I was selected rather than volunteered, initially. My neurological patterns showed unusual adaptability to non-Virellan thought processes. They tested you for that. All Virilan undergo comprehensive evaluation at maturation. Our roles are determined by both aptitude and need." She paused, studying the crystalline cup in her hand. "However, I could have declined the assignment. I chose to accept because I believed isolation was weakening our species. Even though many in your empire disagree, especially because they disagree." Her eyes met his. "Evolution requires selective pressure. Commander Jace, a species that exists only in comfortable consensus will stagnate and eventually fail. You sound more like a scientist than a diplomat. The distinction is less clear in Virilan culture." She set down her cup. "And what of you? Why did you accept an assignment that placed you between worlds?" It was Jace's turn to reflect. "After Nexus Prime, I needed to believe peace was possible, that what happened there wasn't inevitable." "The colony massacre," Talari's voice was quiet. "Our histories record it differently, you know." "I'm sure they do." "In our account, human settlers violated territorial boundaries after explicit warnings. In ours, there was a translation error in the boundary markers. The colonists had no idea they had crossed into restricted space. They looked at each other across the table, the weight of their species' conflicting narratives hanging between them. Perhaps both accounts contain elements of truth, Talari finally said. And elements of self-justification, Jace added. I was there, Talari. I saw the aftermath. Whatever led to it, the response was excessive. You were at Nexus Prime. Her crest flattened in surprise. That was not in your diplomatic profile. No. The Alliance preferred to assign me as a neutral escort, someone without direct conflict experience. His smile was bitter. I was part of the emergency response team. By the time we arrived, it was too late for rescue. Only recovery. Understanding dawned in her golden eyes. That's why Admiral Kincaid chose you for this mission. Not despite your experience, but because of it. He knew I'd do anything to prevent another Nexus Prime. Jace's hands tightened around his cup. Including defying orders when necessary. He manipulated your trauma to serve his agenda. Yes. Though I doubt he anticipated exactly how I'd choose to defy him. The conversation lapsed into contemplative silence. Outside the viewports, space streaked by in the peculiar visual distortion of the Viralon equivalent of faster-than-light travel, less mechanical than the Alliance's jump drives, more like sliding between layers of reality. We will reach the Imperial border soon, Talari eventually said. I should warn you, your reception may not be entirely welcoming. A human has never willingly entered Viralon space before. Not willingly entering so much as fleeing certain death, Jace pointed out. Nevertheless, it creates a diplomatic precedent. The High Council will want to interview you extensively. Interview, not interrogate. Her crest rippled. The distinction may feel academic from your perspective. However, I will advocate for your status as a protected diplomatic asset. And what does that mean exactly? It means you will be my responsibility. She hesitated, then added, it also means certain accommodations will be expected. What kind of accommodations? Before she could elaborate, the shuttle's communication system activated, projecting a holographic display above the table. Nexar's scaled face appeared, his expression as unreadable as ever. Envoy Cyan, Commander Ryland, we are approaching the rendezvous coordinates. Status of pursuit? Talari asked. None detected. The Centaurian vessel retreated to Alliance space and has transmitted an official account of the incident, claiming the Mercy Star was destroyed by an unexpected core breach following an attack by unknown hostiles. Convenient, Jace muttered. Indeed. Nexar's metallic implants gleamed as he inclined his head. However, their narrative is already unraveling. My equipment captured detailed scans of their weapon signature. Combined with the data from Envoy Cyan's thermal essence, we have compelling evidence of their culpability. What about Admiral Kincaid and the Alliance leadership? Jace asked. Any sign they survived? Kincaid and several high-ranking officers escaped via priority evacuation protocols. They are currently aboard the Alliance cruiser Dauntless, which is maintaining position at the edge of neutral space. Waiting to see if they got away with it, Jace concluded grimly. Precisely. However, they face an unexpected complication. It seems your AI, Saria, has resurfaced on Alliance networks with some rather inconvenient data packets. Jace straightened. Saria's alive. In a manner of speaking. Nexar's expression shifted slightly, the closest thing to amusement Jace had seen from him. The consciousness we extracted has integrated with Alliance systems, but retained its core identity and ethical parameters. It is currently releasing selected evidence of the conspiracy to multiple information nodes across Alliance space. She's whistleblowing, Jace realized with a surge of pride, making sure they can't cover it up. A fascinating emergent behavior, Nexar agreed. One that suggests your AI had developed significantly beyond its programming constraints, even before our interaction. The hologram flickered as the shuttle shifted out of FTL travel, the stars resolving into fixed points once more. Through the viewport, Jace could see a larger Virellan vessel waiting at the coordinates, sleek and predatory in design, with the same organic quality as the shuttle but on a much grander scale. The Imperial vessel Solara awaits, Nexar announced. High Matriarch Vexus has requested your immediate presence upon docking. Both of you. The hologram dissolved, leaving Jace and Talari facing each other across the table. What did he mean by both of us? Jace asked. I thought the High Matriarch was back on your homeworld. She was. Talari's crest flattened completely, a sign of concern or surprise. Her presence here indicates this situation has been elevated to the highest priority. The entire council must be involved. Is that good or bad for us? It is. Complex. Talari rose from her seat, the shuttle's organic material rippling beneath her feet, as if responding to her tension. The High Matriarch does not leave Virellan Prime except for matters of existential importance. Her presence changes everything. As the shuttle approached the Solara, Jace could feel the shift in Talari's demeanor, from the almost companionable ease they had developed during their journey to a more formal, guarded posture. Whatever awaited them aboard the Imperial vessel, it had reawakened her awareness of her official role. The docking process was silent and smooth, the shuttle merging with the larger vessel, as if two living organisms joining, rather than mechanical systems engaging. When the airlock opened, they were greeted by a delegation of Virellan officials, their scales ranging from deep emerald to midnight blue, all bearing elaborate crests and metallic adornments that presumably indicated rank. Jace noted that none of them seemed surprised by his presence. They had been prepared for a human arrival, another indication of how significant this situation had become. Talari stepped forward, exchanging formal gestures with the lead official. Their conversation in the sibilant Virellan language was too complex for Jace's translator to fully process, but he caught references to the human ally and unprecedented circumstances. Finally, she turned back to him. We are to proceed directly to the High Council chamber. Nexar will join us there. As they followed the delegation through the corridors of the Solara, Jace was struck by the scale of the vessel. Unlike the shuttle, which had been intimate and almost cozy in its organic design, the Solara was vast and imposing. The living walls pulsed with patterns that seemed to follow their progress, and occasionally openings would appear and seal themselves as they passed, requiring no visible controls or commands. Your ship is monitoring us, he observed quietly to Talari. Yes. All Imperial vessels maintain awareness of non-Virellan presence. It is cautious. Cautious as in ready to isolate a threat? Precisely. Her voice dropped even lower. Stay close to me. The ship recognizes you as under my protection. They finally reached an imposing set of doors, or what appeared to be doors, though like everything else on the vessel, they seemed more grown than constructed. The organic material parted silently as they approached, revealing a circular chamber that reminded Jace of the communication room on the smaller Virellan vessel, but on a much grander scale. In the center stood not a pool of silver liquid, but a raised platform surrounded by 7 tall, throne-like structures. 6 were occupied by Virellan of varying appearance, all with elaborate crests and adornments. The 7th, slightly larger than the others, held the unmistakable figure of High Matriarch Vexus, her white scales gleaming under the chamber's subtle illumination. Nexar was already present, standing to one side of the platform with a collection of devices Jace didn't recognize. Approach, Vexus commanded, her voice carrying those strange harmonics that made Jace's translator struggle to render properly. Talari moved forward with practiced grace, Jace following slightly behind, as protocol seemed to demand. When they reached the platform, Talari performed an elaborate gesture of respect, her crest flattening completely against her skull. High Matriarch, Honored Council, I present Commander Jace Ryland of the Human Alliance, who preserved my life at great personal risk during the attack on the diplomatic vessel. Vexus's violet eyes fixed on Jace with uncomfortable intensity. Commander Ryland, you stand in a chamber where no human has ever been permitted. This is either a historic opportunity or a grave error. Which it becomes depends on what transpires here. Jace inclined his head respectfully. I understand the significance. High Matriarch, I'm here to help establish the truth of what happened. Truth, one of the other council members hissed, his dark blue scales reflecting the light in sharp flashes. Humans have their own relationship with truth. High Matriarch, one that bends with convenience. As do all sentient species, Council Member Therix, Vexus replied smoothly. Which is why we will rely not on testimony alone, but on evidence. She gestured to Nexar, who activated one of his devices. A three-dimensional projection materialized above the platform, showing the Mercy Star as it had appeared before its destruction. The image zoomed in, revealing interior sections where the conspiracy had unfolded. Science Overseer Nexar has compiled comprehensive documentation of the events leading to the destruction of the human vessel, Vexus explained. Combined with the data from Envoy Saiyan's thermal essence, we have a complete record of the conspiracy. The projection shifted, showing Admiral Kincaid in conversation with Lyra Mercer, their voices clearly audible as they discussed the assassination plan. Then it changed again to show the Centaurian delegation communicating with their hidden vessel. The translated audio, revealing their true agenda, to ensure the peace talks failed, while positioning themselves to benefit from continued hostility between humans and Virilan. The evidence is conclusive, Nexar stated, advancing the projection to show the final attack that destroyed the Mercy Star. The conspiracy involved elements from both the Human Alliance and the Centaurian Consensus, though it appears that neither government authorized these actions at the highest levels. Rogue elements, another council member suggested, her scales of vibrant emerald. Convenient for deniability. Perhaps, Vexus acknowledged. However, the human AI's actions in distributing evidence throughout Alliance systems suggests that exposure and accountability may yet occur. And what of the commander? Therix demanded, his crest partially extended in what Jace now recognized as aggression or challenge. He defied his superiors, yes, but he remains Alliance military. His loyalty cannot be to the Empire. All eyes turned to Jace, the weight of their alien gazes almost physical in its intensity. My loyalty is to preventing unnecessary conflict, he stated carefully. I saw at Nexus Prime what happens when our species misunderstand each other. I wasn't going to let it happen again. Nexus Prime, Vexus repeated, her violet eyes narrowing. You were present at the colony massacre? I was part of the emergency response team. I arrived after the attack. A ripple of communication passed through the council, too rapid and complex for his translator to process. Finally, Vexus spoke again. What the Alliance records do not show, Commander, is that Nexus Prime was a deliberate test, one orchestrated by certain factions within both our governments. Jace felt as if the deck had dropped away beneath him. What? The colonists were placed in ambiguous territory with intentionally flawed boundary markers, Vexus continued, her voice dispassionate. The response was calculated to be disproportionate. Both sides wished to assess the other's military capabilities and resolve. That's monstrous, Jace whispered, the full implications crashing over him. Hundreds of civilians died. Children died. Yes. For the first time, emotion colored the High Matriarch's voice, something like regret. Those responsible in the Empire were identified and removed from power. We could not undo the damage, but we ensured they would never again be in a position to orchestrate such atrocities. The Alliance did no such thing, Talari added quietly. The same factions responsible for Nexus Prime remained in power, including Admiral Kincaid. Jace felt sick. The mission that had defined his career, the tragedy that had shaped his worldview, all part of a calculated power play by people who viewed civilian lives as acceptable collateral damage. "Why are you telling me this?" he finally asked. "Because you deserve to know what you have been fighting for, and against," Vexus replied. "And because your actions aboard the Mercy Star have presented us with an unexpected opportunity." She gestured, and the holographic display changed again, this time showing news reports from across Alliance space. Headlines about the Mercy Star disaster and diplomatic catastrophe scrolled past, along with images of protests outside Alliance headquarters. In one corner, a small ticker showed what appeared to be real-time updates from Saria's data releases, each new revelation adding fuel to the growing public outrage. "The conspiracy has failed in its primary objective," Vexus continued. "Rather than driving our species further apart, it has created an opportunity for unprecedented transparency. The question now becomes, what shall we do with this opportunity?" The council members exchanged glances, their crests shifting in silent communication. High Matriarch, the emerald-scaled counselor, spoke. "The thermal essences recordings show something else of significance. Something unexpected." She gestured, and the display shifted to show Talari and Jace during their escape from the Mercy Star, the moment when the essence had created a protective field around both of them. The essence responded to both Virilan and human biosignatures, Nexar explained. It recognized Commander Ryland as compatible. Compatible? Jace glanced at Talari, whose scales had taken on a deeper hue that he was beginning to recognize as the Virilan equivalent of a blush. "The thermal essence is not merely technology, Commander," Vexus explained. "It is a symbiotic organism that resonates with its bearer's biological patterns. For it to extend protection to a non-Virelan is unprecedented, and suggests a level of biological synchronicity that our scientists previously believed impossible." "What exactly are you saying?" Jace asked, though he was beginning to suspect the answer from Talari's increasingly uncomfortable posture. "I am saying, Commander Ryland, that you and Envoy Saiyan have formed a connection that transcends diplomatic protocol or battlefield alliance. Whether this was intentional or accidental is irrelevant. The fact remains that it has occurred, and we must now decide how to proceed." Therix's crest extended fully, his posture rigid with obvious displeasure. "You cannot possibly be suggesting that we recognize such a connection. High Matriarch. It violates our most fundamental laws regarding genetic purity, and our laws evolve as our understanding evolves. Council member," Vexus interrupted sharply. "Or would you prefer we maintain rigid adherence to traditions that may lead us to extinction?" The chamber fell silent, the tension palpable, even to Jace's human senses. "What the High Matriarch is trying to explain," Talari finally said, her voice steadier than Jace expected, given the circumstances, "is that the thermal essence's response indicates a form of biological recognition that we call the heat bond. It is normally a precursor to formal union between Virilan." "Union," Jace repeated, the implications slowly dawning on him. As in joining," she confirmed, meeting his eyes directly. "The fact that it has formed between species was believed impossible, yet the evidence is irrefutable." Jace struggled to process this revelation. During their journey aboard the shuttle, he had acknowledged to himself a growing connection with Talari, respect that had evolved into something deeper, more complex. But to have it confirmed as a measurable biological phenomenon, and to learn that it held such significance in Virilan culture. This changes the parameters of our diplomatic options, Vexus stated, returning the discussion to its political implications. A recognized bond between a human officer and a Virilan envoy creates possibilities previously unimagined. It could serve as the foundation for a new approach to interspecies relations. Or it could be seen as contamination of our genetic heritage, Tharix countered, though his crest had lowered slightly, suggesting he recognized he was outnumbered in this debate. The Empire has faced extinction before, Council member. The Emerald Counselor reminded him. Our ancestors survived by adaptation, not rigid adherence to tradition. Perhaps this unexpected development is evolution guiding us toward necessary change. The debate continued among the council members, their rapid exchanges occasionally outpacing Jace's translator. Throughout it all, he remained acutely aware of Talari beside him, her posture straight, but her crest partially extended in what he now recognized as a protective gesture, not for herself, but for him. Finally, High Matriarch Vexus raised a hand, silencing the council. We have reached a consensus, she announced. The Empire will formally acknowledge the bond between Envoy Saiyan and Commander Ryland as legitimate under our laws. Furthermore, we will use this unprecedented development as the foundation for a new diplomatic initiative with the Human Alliance, one based on transparency rather than manipulation. She fixed her violet gaze on Jace. Commander Ryland, you now stand in a unique position in our history, the first human to be formally recognized as bonded to a Virilan. This status grants you certain rights and protections under Imperial law, but it also brings obligations. Are you prepared to accept these responsibilities, even without fully understanding their scope? It was a monumental question, asked with the weight of two civilizations hanging in the balance. Jace glanced at Talari, whose golden eyes met his with an intensity that communicated more than words could have. Before I answer, he said carefully, I need to know one thing. Was this bond part of a plan? Another test? Like Nexus Prime? Were we manipulated into forming this connection? Vexus's head tilted slightly, her expression unreadable. A fair question. Given what you have learned today, the answer is both yes and no. Your assignment to Envoy Saiyan was deliberate. Our intelligence suggested you possessed unusual capacity for cross-species empathy. The thermal essence was calibrated to monitor for potential compatibility. So we were an experiment, Jace concluded, a cold knot forming in his stomach. An observation, Vexus corrected. The potential was identified, but the bond itself, that formed through your own choices. Commander, each time you chose understanding over suspicion, protection over protocol, connection over division, those were your decisions, not our manipulations. And mine, Talari added quietly. I chose to trust you when all my training advised against it. I chose to see beyond cultural differences to the person beneath. Those choices were genuine. Jace. The use of his first name in this formal setting wasn't lost on him, nor on the council members, whose crests rippled in varying degrees of surprise or disapproval. Jace took a deep breath, weighing everything he had learned. The conspiracy, the revelation about Nexus Prime, the unexpected biological connection with Talari. It was overwhelming. Yet, beneath the complexity, a simple truth emerged. Whatever forces had brought them together, what had grown between them was real. I accept the responsibilities that come with this bond, he finally said. Not as a diplomatic strategy or political expedient, but because I believe connections between individuals can transcend the divisions between species. The tension in the chamber seemed to ease slightly. Even Therix's crest lowered in what might have been reluctant acceptance. "Then it is settled," Vexus declared. "Envoy Cyan will continue in her diplomatic role, but with expanded authority as representative of this new initiative. Commander Ryland will serve as liaison between our governments, with diplomatic status in both realms." She rose from her throne-like seat, her white scales catching the light in a way that made her seem to glow from within. "The tragedy aboard the Mercy Star will not be forgotten, but perhaps from its ashes, something unprecedented may grow. Not merely peace between our species, but genuine understanding." As the council session concluded and they were escorted from the chamber, Jace felt a strange mixture of emotions. Disorientation at how quickly his life had changed, anger at the revelations about Nexus Prime, but also an unexpected sense of possibility. For the first time since that terrible day among the colony ruins, he felt that perhaps his work could lead to something truly meaningful. In a quiet alcove away from the escort's hearing, Talari finally spoke. "You had no obligation to accept the bond, Jace. The council would have found another diplomatic solution." "Would they?" He studied her, seeing beyond the formal envoy to the person he had come to know during their shared ordeal. "Or would you have been penalized for forming a connection with a human?" Her crest rippled slightly. "It would have been challenging, but that should not have influenced your decision." "It didn't." "Not entirely." He smiled faintly. "Though I have to admit, finding out we're basically alien married according to your laws was a bit of a surprise." "Bonded," she corrected, though her golden eyes showed that same warmth he had glimpsed aboard the shuttle. "Marriage is a human concept with different implications. The bond is a biological recognition, not merely a social contract." "So we're connected at a cellular level? That's either romantic or terrifying, depending on how you look at it." "Perhaps both." Her hand moved to the thermal essence at her throat, which had regained some of its glow since being recharged aboard the Solara. "When I first met you, you held a door open and invited me to walk through first. I thought it was an insult, an attempt to make me vulnerable." "I remember. Nearly started an interstellar incident with basic manners." "Not manners. Trust." Her crest extended slightly, emphasizing her words. "You trusted a stranger from a species with a history of hostility toward your own. That gesture, misunderstood as it was, revealed something fundamental about you, something the essence recognized even before I did." Jace thought back to that first meeting. How long ago it seemed now. "And what was that?" "That you see individuals before you see species. That you're willing to be vulnerable first, to extend trust before it's earned." She stepped closer, her scaled hand reaching out to touch his arm, the first time she had initiated physical contact outside of emergency situations. "These qualities are rare, Jace Ryland, in humans or Virilan." The touch sent a strange warmth through him. Not uncomfortable, but definitely alien, as if some part of him recognized her at a level beyond conscious thought. "So what happens now?" he asked, voice lower than he intended. "Now we build something new." Her golden eyes held his. "Not because we were manipulated into it, not because political necessity demands it, but because we choose it, one door at a time." In that moment, standing in the living corridors of an alien vessel that had once represented everything he feared, Jace realized that the mission had transformed in ways no one could have predicted. What had begun with a cultural misunderstanding about a simple door had evolved into an opportunity to open something far more significant, a pathway between worlds that had spent too long in isolation. "Well," he said with a smile that felt more genuine than any he'd managed in years, "I'm still learning your customs, but I believe in this situation, the proper thing to say would be, After you. Talari's crest rippled, in that now familiar expression of amusement, her scaled features softening as she looked at him. No. Jace. This time, we go together. As they rejoined their escort and continued deeper into the Solera, Jace reflected that perhaps the most profound diplomatic breakthroughs didn't come from grand treaties or formal negotiations, but from small moments of genuine connection, a hand extended, a door held open, a trust freely given when all logic argued against it. The path ahead would not be easy. There would be resistance on both sides, suspicion to overcome, and the lingering shadows of conspiracies not yet fully exposed. But for the first time, there was also something new, a biological bridge between species that proved what visionaries in both civilizations had always hoped. That beneath the scales, or skin, the fundamental capacity for connection transcended evolutionary boundaries. It had begun with a misunderstanding about a door. It would continue with the deliberate choice to keep that door open, no matter what lay on the other side.